Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto Vampire Bloodline. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Friday, October 10th. Naruto grumbled as he kicked a stone across the street as he made his way home from the academy as the sun began to dip below the Hokage monument, casting a fire-lit sky over the village. The will of fire, as many of the citizens of the village would call it. Stupid Iruka-sensei for giving me detention. The blonde continued to grumble to himself. I wasn't even anywhere near the bookshelf when it fell over. However, the more the blonde thought about it, the less it made sense. The bookshelf in question was massive. While he would like to think he was strong, even he knew there was no way he could have moved that heavy piece of furniture by himself, let alone completely tip it over. Still, the scared Chunin had singled him out in front of the entire class, despite the young blonde being on the complete opposite side of the room. So, while the rest of the class got to go home once the bell rung, he had been stuck cleaning up the massive pile of books that had spilled out onto the floor. Of course this had taken him hours to complete and Iruka hadn't lifted a finger to help him in the slightest. Even when Naruto had pleaded with his sensei to help him, citing that he really needed to get home before sundown. Of course Iruka had scoffed at the boy's words, accusing Naruto of trying to guilt him into letting him go unpunished due to it being his birthday. Much to the blonde's dismay, as he had been forced to stay until every last book had been picked up and placed back in the proper order, which only added to the blonde's frustration, since he didn't even know which order the books went in, and he was fairly certain Iruka didn't either. Leading him to believe that the scared Chunin was doing this on purpose just to hold him longer. Which led to why the blonde was walking by himself down the street towards his rundown apartment that the old man had given him when he had been kicked out of the orphanage 4 years ago when he was just 6 years old. At one point it had been a nice apartment, but over the past 4 years the villagers would gather and form mobs and vandalize the residence. Not to mention robbing him of any valuables he may have had, no matter how small. Since then, any valuables Naruto had been given, he would immediately ask the one person he could trust to hold on to them for safety. One Anko Mitarashi, an eccentric kunoichi with a penchant for blood, and like him, a pariah for something out of her control. Though unlike him, she actually knew why the villagers hated her. After one particularly bad incident in which the mob had attempted to burn the entire apartment complex down with him still inside it, Anko had literally begged him to stay with her. However, as touched as he was, he declined, telling her that he would not be able to live with himself if he caused harm to one of his few precious people within the village. Explaining that he had numerous escape routes from his apartment, and the fire had only opened up more ways for him to escape with entire walls missing between the apartments. Anko had not liked that, but had conceded, though she had made it very clear that if something like that were to happen again, she would drag him to her apartment and lock him inside just to keep him safe, even if she had to tie him to her bed. This of course had caused the blonde to blush severely at the unintended implications, followed by a string of teasing. Though honestly, I really wouldn't mind if Anko-chan did want to do such things with me. Naruto grinned at the thought. After all, she is only 4 or 5 years older than me. While he still had a crush on Sakura, if he were forced to choose between Sakura and Anko, he would take Anko without any hesitation. Sure, Sakura was cute and, well, that was literally all she had going for her. This thought caused the young blonde to pause in his step and frown slightly. Speaking of which, why'd I like Sakura? He mentally questioned himself, for the first time not using the affectionate chan suffix at the end of her name. Sure, she was nice to me when I was 6, but that only lasted a week before she became just like everyone else. And unlike the other kids, I can't blame her parents, since her mother encouraged her to be friends with me. Sure, he didn't rule out the possibility that once they got home they could have told their daughter to stay away from him, but that didn't make any sense, when they could just openly scorn him like everyone else in the village. Now that he thought about it, there was really only 2 classmates his own age that were even remotely nice to him. Hinata Hyuga, who was a quiet little mouse of a girl that had absolutely despised conflict and did all she could to avoid it. The other was surprisingly Ino Yamanaka, Sakura's former best friend and now rival for the vaunted, last, Uchiha. Though while she was a fangirl for the emo, at least she didn't treat others like trash like Sakura did. Anko-chan on the other hand. He grinned as he continued his previous train of thought. While Sakura could be described as cute, Anko is the very definition of a femme fatale. Despite only being 15, she already has the curves that complemented her lithe frame, and unlike Sakura, she took her career as a kunoichi very seriously. Maybe I should teasingly ask her out on a date when she gets back, and see what she does. Naruto commented offhandedly to himself with a slight grin. Normally when his birthday approached, Anko would take it upon herself to escort him wherever he needed to go. However, this particular week she had been tasked with a reconnaissance mission outside of the village, which was highly unusual, since she was the second in command for the torture and interrogation department within the village. Something that the snake mistress had been vocal about when she had been given the mission. However, orders were orders, and she was forced to accept the mission since she was the best at infiltration. However, before she left, Anko had made it very clear to the old man that should anything happen to her Naruto while she was out of the village, she would personally hunt down all involved with a wrathful vengeance. Snapping out of his musing, Naruto realized that he was completely alone on the street. No sounds, nothing, only complete and utter silence. For most people, this wouldn't have seemed too odd, as it was the time of day that many were in their homes and relaxing, but for Naruto, it spelled trouble. Feeling a sense of dread washing over him, he picked up his pace to a slight jog as he hurried towards his apartment. However, the blonde boy had barely made it a block before his surroundings began to shimmer and drop, revealing a waiting mob of villagers in front of him, armed with a variety of weapons, everything from broken bottles to kitchen knives. Whilst the shinobi in the group had their kunai and shuriken, forcing Naruto to stop in his tracks. Turning around, he froze as he saw a second mob closing in on him from behind. "You're not going anywhere, demon." One of the civilians grinned as the two groups began to close in on both sides of the boy. With no other option, Naruto ran into the alleyway, hoping for a means to escape the mob. Sadly, those hopes were dashed as he came face to face with a tall wooden fence that blocked his progress, with no other means to escape around him. Turning, he saw the mob closing in on him. "Hey, we decided to start early this year," another nameless member of the mob commented. "And with that snake whore out of the village, you're all alone with no one to come to help you." Another grinned. "And you have nowhere to go." Yet another commented, while also throwing a bottle at the boy, causing it to shatter across the wooden fence behind Naruto. Naruto could only watch in horror and await the inevitable to happen as the crowd moved in on him. Which it did seconds later, as another bottle was thrown from the crowd and struck him in the head, creating a large gash in his scalp, causing him to cry out in pain as blood poured from the open wound. His cries of pain seemed to be the signal for the rest to start, as blows came raining down on him, hitting him in the stomach and head, causing him to spit up blood. Then came the weapons, as the civilians would cut into his body with their kitchen knives, some of which were dull and rusted to try and increase the chance of a severe infection for later on if they had failed to kill him this night. While the shinobi of the crowd employed their own weapons and jutsus. At some point during the inclusion of weapons, Naruto had found both of his hands pinned into the fence above him, with a kunai jammed through both of them, holding him off his feet. Now unable to cover himself, the mob began to assault his body more freely, creating large gashes down his arms, legs, and across his chest, causing more and more blood to spill out onto the ground below him. As this happened, Naruto began to slip in and out of consciousness, his body now numb to the pain as his entire nervous system was sent into shock from the onslaught of injuries. "Oh no you don't," one of the shinobi said, as he noticed the boy falling unconscious. "You're going to stay away through all of this. We owe you for stealing away our families and friends, you demon brat." Before Naruto could register what was being said to him, he screamed out in renewed pain as the chunin in front of him used a fairly weak lightning jutsu to electrocute him, bringing him back into the world of consciousness. "There we go." The man chuckled while mockingly slapping Naruto's cheek, whom could only glare at the crowd through half-lidded eyes. "You look cold, how about we warm you up, demon?" Another one of the shinobi commented with a laugh as he went through a series of hand signals before taking a deep breath and sending a series of fireballs at the fence, igniting what was left of the boy's shredded and bloody pants on fire. Feebly, Naruto attempted to kick the flames out as he could feel the flames starting to lick at his exposed flesh. This of course only prompted more laughter from the mob at the young blonde's pain. This went on for a handful of seconds before a trio of civilians stepped forward and undid the front of their pants and began to urinate on the poor child, putting out the flames that were beginning to sputter out, unable to ignite Naruto's pants, since they were so weighed down by his blood. Now to end this, an Anbu with gravity-defying silver hair stepped forward, with his Hite 8 covering his left eye, while a black mask covered the lower half of his face. Going through a series of hand seals, he charged lightning into his right hand before charging forth and impaling Naruto in the chest, near where his heart would be. "This is for my sensei, you bastard." Barely consciousness, Naruto could only watch helplessly as his blood poured out onto the ground as the shinobi of the group began to disperse, leaving only civilians behind to continue to admire their handiwork. However, one of the Chunin stopped for a moment and looked back one final time, a look of satisfaction in his eyes before he followed after the silver-haired man that had delivered the final blow. Unknown to the mob, however, their actions had a witness, and she had seen enough. Dropping down from the rooftop she was perched on, she sauntered towards the group. A devious smirk on her lips. Her calf-length rosy pink hair flowing in the wind created by her wake that had been tied up partially into two pigtails by a pair of black hairpieces that resembled bat wings. Two separate hairpieces adorned the front of her hair, giving her the appearance of having two small horns at either temple. Aside from her adornments in her hair, she is dressed in a short black, frilly-styled dress with a layer of white ruffles over black ruffles of her skirt. Her top has a raindrop shape opening between her breasts, with the straps of the top crossed before reaching around her neck, leaving her back open to the warm night air with an X-shaped crossing stitches tightening it at her waist, along with a strip of pink that goes down both sides at the front of her top and ends at bows just above the ruffles on her skirt. 5 golden buttons are distributed evenly going down either side between the pink strips. Along with her attire, she wears a white collar of lace parted in the center of her neck that reaches over her collarbones, bound by a pink ribbon with a large bow on the right side of her neck. A golden oval decoration in the center of the ribbon. To accompany her top, she wears detached loose black sleeves that are puffed up under her shoulders that run past her hands, becoming wider at the end, completely covering her hands. Black ribbons tied into a bow at the top of the outermost sleeves. Under these sleeves, the pink-haired woman wears a pair of black fingerless gloves that are tight-fitting. Finishing her attire are a simple pair of tall black boots that are folded just below her knees. Her sharp crimson eyes focusing on the blonde that had been crucified to the fence as she drew closer to the civilians that were still gathered in front of the poor boy, all of which were talking and laughing amongst each other as if torturing a child was a common occurrence for them before they noticed the exotic pink-haired beauty stalking towards them, each gaining a lecherous grin on their faces, and some began to proposition the girl for a night of pleasure with the heroes of the village for disposing of the demon brat that killed their beloved Yondaime. Pathetic, the pink-haired girl scoffed at the men. A bunch of arrogant insects thinking that they are brave for beating a mere child. "This is no child, bitch," one of the civilians snarled. "This is the demon that killed our beloved Yondaime. Demons come in many forms, but never in the form of an innocent child." She responded cryptically. Before any of the villagers could retort, the pink-haired girl shot forward with blinding speed, hitting her unlucky target so fast that he was literally cut in half from the impact of the blow. Not giving the rest time to react to what was transpiring, the young girl proceeded to quickly and effortlessly slaughter those present, leaving those from the mob as nothing but paste on the ground. Smirking at her work, she licked the blood off her fingers before turning to the crucified boy. Approaching him, she could see he was still alive, but just barely. Knowing he only had minutes to live, she cupped his face and moved it so that he was looking into her eyes. "Beautiful," he whispered weakly. "I've been watching you for some time, Naruto-kun." She smiled tenderly. "But we don't have much time. I have the means to save you, but it will come at a price. Do you understand, Naruto-kun?" Weakly Naruto nodded, indicating that he understood. While he didn't know what price he would have to pay was, he surely wasn't ready to die just yet. He still had to ask Anko out on a date. "Very good, normally I would have to drain you until you were on the Shinigami's doorstep, but it looks like these fools have already done that," she commented, though still proceeded to wipe some of his blood from his neck and lick it off her finger, causing her eyes to widen slightly before she shook it off. Grinning knowingly, she bit the inside of her cheek, causing her mouth to become filled with her own blood before she leaned forward and pressed her lips against Naruto's, gently forcing his mouth open to allow her blood to flow into his mouth and down his throat. Meanwhile, she reached up and easily removed the kunai that held his hands up, tossing it away as she supported his limp form. Breaking the kiss, she picked him up in a bridal position. That was my first kiss. He responded weakly before darkness fully claimed him, earning a smile from the pink-haired vampire as she disappeared into the night, just as the Anbu on patrol arrived, only to find that a massacre had taken place. Shit, Anko is going to be pissed. One of the Anbu with purple hair thought behind her cat mask, all the while cursing the fact that her team had been held up due to a dispute that had erupted in the market square that had taken their attention off their charge. The next morning, slowly, Naruto stirred awake as the sunlight filtered through the curtains of the room he was in. Turning over in the bed to hide his face from the invading sunlight, he was met face to face with a red-haired woman whom was also asleep in the same bed as him. However, what completely woke him up was the fact that she was completely naked. What the? Naruto didn't get to finish his shock as he fell out of the bed and landed with a thud onto the hardwood floor. It was then that he realized that not only was he in bed with a naked, yet attractive woman, but that he was not in his apartment. Hell, this room alone was bigger than his entire apartment. "Ah, you're awake," came a feminine voice from the door, prompting the young blonde to look towards the door from where the voice had come from. In doing so, he was greeted with the sight of the pink-haired girl from the previous night. Realizing this, he quickly looked down and examined his own body only to realize another embarrassing fact. Like the woman in the bed, he was also in a state of undress. Seeing this, he quickly covered himself with the blankets that had come with him in an attempt to save his modesty. "I am glad to see your turning went perfectly," she commented as she fully entered the room and walked over to the window, opening the curtains to allow the sunlight to completely flood the room, causing the woman still on the bed to groan in protest. "What do you mean, my turning?" Naruto asked, clearly confused. "Last night you were attacked, remember?" the pink-haired girl inquired, earning a nod from the blonde. "In order to save your life, or to be exact, to give you a chance at life, I changed you into a vampire, like myself. Though it did have some unforeseen consequences." "Wait, a vampire?" The blonde tilted his head as he sat up into a sitting position on the floor. "You mean, drink blood, turning into bats, and get staked in the heart vampire?" This caused the pink-haired girl to giggle at the boy's antics. To put it simply, she found his confusion to be cute. "Well, the drink blood part, yes, but where are my manners?" the pink-haired vampire commented before she took an exaggerated bow before him. "My name is Cruel Teps, last survivor of the House of Teps." Pleasure to meet you." Naruto responded a bit embarrassed. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki." Cruel smiled as she walked over to him. "As I said, I've been watching you for a while." "Why me?" the blonde asked, carefully standing up so he could sit more comfortably on the bed, though keeping the blankets in place to cover his modesty. "In truth?" the pinkette inquired, earning another nod from the newly turned vampire. "I've been looking for the perfect mate, a king if you will." Hearing this, Naruto's eyes widened in shock. She chose him of all people to be her mate. Her king, as she called it. "But why me?" he asked again, trying to wrap his mind around what he had just been told. "Surely there are other far stronger guys out there." "You are far stronger than you realize, Naruto-kun." She giggled, sitting on the bed next to him, causing him to shift rather nervously. "And strength doesn't always mean physical. The strength I've been looking for resides within here," she continued as she placed her hand on his chest where his heart is. Upon doing so, Naruto realized yet another thing. His heart was still beating, and rather quickly due to the close proximity of Cruel sitting next to him. However, Naruto realized one last, and a bit depressing thing, prompting him to slump his shoulders in a depressed state. Though before he could ponder this depressing fact for much longer, the pink-haired vampire interrupted his musings. "You're worried you won't be able to ask Yuha-Beheim out on a date, aren't you?" She smiled knowingly. "Wah," was Naruto's intelligent response, causing Cruel to giggle once more. "I gained some of your memories when I tasted your blood last night," she replied with a smirk. "And don't worry, as the only male vampire in this coven, you can seek out other mates." "Wait, you can see my memories just by drinking my blood?" Naruto inquired, now becoming a bit more interested in this vampire stuff. "Not just that," the pinkette pointed out. "If you drink the blood of a shinobi, you can gain some of their knowledge of jutsus and such." However, unless you practice with them, you will not be able to perform the jutsus at the same level. You will still need to learn their discipline. Naruto could only gape like a fish for a handful of seconds as he let that register in his brain. He could learn countless jutsu just by feeding off of a shinobi. Though he would still need to train in it to perfect any jutsu he were to gain from said feeding. I suppose this is where you tell me that I shouldn't go drinking blood from random shinobi just to learn new jutsus? Got it in one. Cruel giggled. Yeah, I guess it would be bad if I went off like some rabid animal. He nervously chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. So what happens now? I mean, I know nothing about being a vampire except what is shown in the movies and books. Well, you know blood will be a big part of your new life. Cruel stated, earning a nod from the blonde. As for the movies and books, forget it. If we literally had all of those weaknesses, we wouldn't be very good predators, now would we? So from you opening the window, I already gathered that sunlight doesn't do jack against a vampire, unless you have seals on the window or something. Naruto observed. Correct, no need to worry about losing your tan. What about silver? Holy ground? Or stakes through the heart? Nope, nope, and while painful, nope. Ramen? Naruto inquired, almost pitifully. This of course earned another cute giggle from the pink-haired vampire. Don't worry, you can still enjoy your ramen. She smiled. Though just so you know, while it will fill you up, it will not give you the nutrients you need. However, don't sweep the blood drinking just yet. For the first few days, you will be drinking from me. Drinking from you? He stammered, his face burning red with a blush. Yes, Cruel replied. This is how I pass on my knowledge and teachings to you. The same way I was able to see your memories, you will gain some of my knowledge. Speaking of which, you're probably hungry, aren't you? Almost as if on cue, his throat began to feel dry and parched, prompting him to lick his lips slightly. Seeing this, Cruel smiled and stood up and brought him to stand with her, the blanket forgotten. Tilting her neck to the side to give him access, she brought her mate in close and allowed him to follow his instincts. On Naruto's end, he could smell the blood coursing underneath the pinkette skin. As such, he could feel his canines lengthening slightly. Opening his mouth, he bit down onto her exposed neck, allowing her warm crimson fluid to flood his mouth as he was rewarded with a pleasured moan from the pinkette. This went on for a handful of minutes before Naruto removed his mouth from her neck, drawing in deep breaths of air as he hadn't realized he had been holding his breath the entire time he had fed from her. Very good, Naruto-kun, Cruel praised as she peered into his cerulean blue's eyes. Leaning in, she captured his lips, tasting her own blood upon them. Though unlike the previous night, this was a more sensual kiss filled with emotion and love before she broke the kiss with a smile. You said there was a complication with my turning. Naruto remembered, though completely forgetting about his state of undress. What did you mean by that? That would be me. A voice sounded from the bed behind them, prompting Naruto to turn around and peer into a pair of crimson eyes, with slit pupils. However, when he turned around, the red-haired beauty that laid across the bed blushed and quickly turned her face away. At first Naruto was confused until a slight draft of air alerted him to his nether regions. Blushing in embarrassment, he quickly covered up. Sorry, he stammered. Who are you? I am Yoko Kurama. The red-haired woman introduced herself, while covering her own self with the sheets that were still on the bed. But you probably know me better as the Kyuubi no Yoko. Hearing this, Naruto's eyes went wide while his blood ran cold. But, how? Well, the Shinigami's seal bound both of our souls together. If you die, I die kind of thing. Yoko explained. However, since you technically died with your turning, I was released from the seal. Though our souls are still bounded together, so since you're still here, I'm still here. Out of curiosity, Naruto looked down at his gut and found that the seal was still there, but severely faded. So what now? Naruto asked, looking back to the red-haired woman. Are you going to finish destroying the village or? Peeved. I didn't even want to do that in the first place. The Kyuubi woman scoffed, rolling her eyes. That damned Okich bastard trapped me in a genjutsu after he ripped me from your mother. Wait, my mother? Yes. Yoko sighed at the sad fact that her friend was gone, though she found it odd that the boy didn't know who his mother was. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was my previous host. Upon hearing this, Naruto couldn't help but slump down onto the bed as his knees gave out. Silently, he sobbed to himself, allowing his tears to fall freely down his cheeks. He didn't know if he should be happy that he finally knew who his mother was, or if he should be upset. Clearly the old man knew who his parents were, yet whenever he asked the elder Hokage, it was always the same answer. A soft apology, and that he didn't know. While Yoko was confused by the blonde's reaction, Cruel understood, having already had access to his memories. Kneeling down, she wrapped her arms around him and comforted him the best he could. Peering over the blonde's shoulder at the crimson-haired woman, she noted the Kyuubi woman's confusion. Naruto-kun is unaware of who his parents are. She sighed. Every time he would ask the old monkey, he was always given the same lie. What do you mean? Yoko asked, even more confused now. Who is the Hokage anyways? Hiruzen Sarutobi. But, he was the one that married both Minato and Kushina. The red-haired woman exclaimed. What? Naruto swiftly turned to face the Kyuubi woman. You mean that the Yondaime is my father? Yes. Yoko titled her head in confusion, still confused before she turned to Cruel, whom had positioned herself next to the blonde and continued to work to calm him. Why doesn't he know who his parents are? I don't know. Cruel answered honestly as he stroked the blonde's back before smiling. But you just fulfilled one of his biggest dreams. He finally knows who his parents are. For her part, Yoko couldn't help but to smile at that. During her time within Kushina, the demoness would listen to her host gush for hours about how strong and handsome her little boy was going to be, and woe to the unfortunate soul that tried to tell her it wasn't going to be a boy. Not to mention, one thing that Kushina was very adamant about, was the fact that as the last male Uzumaki, he was going to have lots of wives to give her lots of grandchildren to spoil. Cruel-chan? Naruto sniffled, having composed himself a bit more. Are there any cloths we can change into? At this, Cruel couldn't help but giggle at the boy's embarrassment, but nodded nonetheless and got up and walked over to a nearby closet and brought out a fresh pair of clothing, which consisted of a pair of black sweatpants and a white t-shirt. These should do for now until we can get the two of you some clothing more to your tastes. The pinkette smiled as she handed her two new guests. Nodding in thanks, Naruto proceeded into the bathroom connected to the room with the blankets still wrapped around his waist, allowing the two girls alone. Once the door shut, Cruel looked to the Kyuubi woman. I need to go have a talk with the old bloodsack. Cruel stated, while I am gone, why don't you talk to him about his mother? Very well, Yoko replied as she swiftly changed into the clothing provided, though she had intended to have a long talk with the blonde Uzumaki about his heritage anyways. Feeling guilty that she was the reason the boy was an orphan and hated throughout the village. Nodding, the pink-haired vampire departed the room, knowing she only had 2 days to teach her newly turned mate the ways of being a vampire, and the importance of keeping their race a secret from the common populace, at least now while their numbers were so low. But for now, she had to inform the old bloodsack of what happened, and that Naruto was hers now, whether he liked it or not. This was not a good day for the Sandaime Hokage. First, there was the report of numerous missing civilians that hadn't come home from the previous night's celebrations. Then there was the fire in the red light district that had engulfed the entire structure before Anbu were able to get it under control to prevent it from spreading to neighboring buildings. Lastly, and the most concerning, was the disappearance of one Naruto Uzumaki. Which led to his current predicament. What the hell happened? A very irate snake mistress demanded as she slammed her hands down on the old mont's desk, causing it to crack slightly under the impact as the 15-year-old began to leak out a considerable amount of killer intent. I was gone for 3 days, and when I get back, Naruto-kun is missing, and his apartment burned down. You promised me, old man. You promised me that he would be looked after. He was being watched over. Hiruzen feebly defended. I had assigned Inu's Anbu team to watch over Naruto-kun. So what you're telling me is that either Inu's team is incompetent, Anko hissed out as black markings were beginning to slowly spread from her shoulder where her curse mark was located, causing some alarm for the Anbu hidden within the office. Or they are involved with Naruto-kun's disappearance. Damn it, old man. Why the hell did you have to send me on this mission? The snake mistress continued as her anger grew, ignoring the growing black marks that were now beginning to travel up her face as her hair started to become more wild in appearance, breaking free of the hair tie that kept it up in her usual fanned ponytail. You know how these walking sacks of shit get around this time of the year. Now Anko dear, I know you're upset. Upset? Anko questioned sarcastically. I get upset when it takes longer than 5 minutes for my dango to arrive. I get upset when my playmate I am interrogating breaks easily and spills everything before I get a chance to really sink my fangs into them. I get upset when that frog fucker of a student of yours tries to blackmails me for. So right now, I am not upset. I'm fucking pissed off. The elder village leader couldn't help but to frown at this bit of information. While he knew that Jiraiya was a pervert, as evident by the publishing of his Icha Icha Paradise books, but to learn that one of his students was blackmailing a kunoichi of the village didn't sit well with him. Hiruzen made a mental note to confront Jiraiya about his actions regarding his kunoichi. That is, if he survives his current encounter. Anko, I assure you. Hiruzen took a deep breath and sighed. I have dispatched every available shinobi to search for young Naruto-kun or any clues as to his whereabouts. And how many of them will actually care if Naruto-kun is safe? Anko challenged with narrowed eyes as her markings ceased spreading, at least for the moment, giving her an extremely intimidating appearance. For his part, Hiruzen couldn't help but flinch at her statement. He knew there were very few that actually cared for the boy, namely the snake mistress before him and her fellow ice queens of Konoha. He had hoped that his own shinobi would be professional enough to carry out their duties regardless of personal feelings, though he knew it was a false hope. As much as he didn't want to admit it. What about your peeping ball? The snake mistress inquired with narrowed eyes, indicating that the elder Hokage used the crystal ball for more lecherous viewing, aside from using it to check in on the blonde child. Nothing. The old man sighed in a defeated tone. Every time I try to focus on Naruto-kun, it only shows an empty alleyway with a bloody fence. This was all Anko needed to hear as she turned on her heel and departed the office before Hiruzen could say anything. Leaving the elder man to worry about the damage the eccentric woman may cause in her hunt to find Naruto, and Kami saved the poor souls that would have anything to do with the boy's disappearance. One thing that Hiruzen had learned over the past few years in regards to Orochimaru's former apprentice was to never push her, Naruto, button. The young teen was fiercely protective over the blonde Jinchuriki, since the two of them met in a chance encounter 2 years ago when the villagers had chanced the boy into the forest of death. Since then, the two pariahs were virtually inseparable, with Anko spending almost every moment she had free with the young blonde. As such, both had become extremely protective over one another. While Naruto lacked the skill and experience that Anko had, the boy more than made up for it in sheer tenacity, defending the snake mistress when she was not around to defend herself. The old man recalled one instance when Tsune's youngest had made some disparaging remarks about the snake mistress, and young Naruto had laid into him good with a series of haymakers that had busted the Inuzuka's nose open. Of course, this led to no shortage of complaints from the council. Namely from the civilian side, who felt the boy should not have friends of any kind, regardless of their social standing. Some of which tried to lobby for Anko to be removed from the village under the guise that she may be corrupting the boy to join Orochimaru. Hiruzen had immediately rejected the request, and as a special treat for the scorned snake mistress, had sent those involved with the suggestion for a special session with Ibiki and herself. So caught up in his thoughts, that the elder village leader failed to notice someone enter the office until she was standing right in front of his desk. Back already, Anko? He asked before looking up to see that it was not Anko that stood before him, but rather Cruel Teps. Swallowing the lump that formed in his throat, he straightened himself within his chair to address the pink-haired vampire. Is there something I can help you with, Ms. Teps? Hiruzen inquired. While Cruel had kept a low profile within the village, the elder leader knew exactly who and what she was. When she arrived at the gates of Konoha 6 years ago, Pinkette had requested a private audience with the elder man, upon which she was upfront about what she was and what she was here for. As such, the two of them had come to an agreement. She would aid in the village's defense if it were to ever come under attack from outside forces, and he would supply her with prisoners sentenced to death to sustain her, so long as she didn't feed from any of the citizens within the village. The only other thing Hiruzen had asked of her was to inform him when she was coming or going from the village. Ah yes. She smiled, showing off her fangs that peeked out from her upper lip. I wished to update you about our agreement and my own personal endeavor. Nodding in understanding, Hiruzen dismissed his Anbu from the room before activating the privacy seals. However, the pink-haired young woman didn't say anything right away. Instead, she cocked her head to the side before silently moving over to the corner of the room before thrusting her hand into what appeared to be a bookshelf, only for the henge to dispel, revealing a blank masked Anbu that was now impaled by the pink-haired vampire. Letting the body fall to the floor, she turned her attention back to the elder man, who looked absolutely livid at the revelation that not only had Danzo did not disband his root Anbu as ordered, but had also been spying on him. However, before Hiruzen could ponder further, the body of the dead Anbu began to rapidly disintegrate, leaving no evidence that he was ever there. Interesting, self-cleaning corpse. Cruel mused with a slight snicker. I suppose the old warmonger doesn't want any evidence to his actions. Indeed, Hiruzen replied grimly, none too happy that he had no evidence to pin such treasonous acts on his old rival. And while he could cite Cruel as a witness to the acts, he had no guarantee she would cooperate, as their deal only implied threats from outside the village, not within. Not to mention the panic it would cause among the council and the populace if it were revealed that the woman before him was a vampire. Now, as I was saying, the young vampire began as if nothing had happened. I have come to inform you that I have found the one who will be my eternal mate. I see, the Hokage replied, clearing his throat. So what are your plans now? Will you be leaving the village to find a place to settle down, or? He was cut off by the Pinkette's giggle. I'm afraid my newly turned fledgling wouldn't want to leave the village anytime soon. Cruel explained with a grin. Despite the way most of the villagers have treated him, he still has a few precious people he holds dear to his heart. Hiruzen could feel his blood freeze within his veins as the implication clicked into place, prompting him to slowly turn his eyes towards the vampire before him. Swallowing thickly as he slowly stood up from behind his desk. You didn't, he breathed. Please Cammy, tell me you didn't turn who I think you did. You can thank your own villagers for what had transpired. Cruel stated, narrowing her eyes slightly. When I found him he was barely alive, having been tortured, burned and had a hole in his chest. Dear Cammy, why didn't you bring him to me? Hiruzen asked, feeling sick at the thought of what the boy went through. 2 reasons. The Pinkette pointed out. 1, there was no time. He was literally minutes away from dying due to the injuries he suffered. And the other? He asked, not knowing if he really wanted to hear the answer. The other, and most pressing. Cruel paused before giving a genuine smile. He was the one. He has a steadfast loyalty to those who are close to his heart. Like his hubby Heim, and even yourself. So what happens now? Hiruzen sighed, resigning to the fact that his surrogate grandson was now a vampire, thanks to his own village putting him in a near-death state. Now, she replied, I will be training and teaching him about his new abilities before naming him heir of the Tepes family. Know this, I will make sure he knows how to defend himself from the villagers so what happened last night does not happen again. The council will not like this. The elder man informed the vampiress. He could already imagine the headache this news was going to bring him when it eventually came out. Speaking of which, how are we going to explain his new abilities and his new diet? I could care less what those bloodsacks like. Cruel scoffed. As for his changes, fear not. As I explained to Naruto-kun before I arrived here, he can still eat normal food, though it will not give him the same nutrients as blood will, and as you know, the fresher the better. As for his new abilities, simple. Explain it off as a Tepes clan blood ritual that gives him my bloodline. You are aware that with that cover, many will demand you give it to the Uchiha boy. Hiruzen warned. It had been 2 years since the poor boy's family had been massacred by his own brother, and already the civilian council and elders had already spoiled the boy to such a degree that he felt everyone was beneath him. All under the notion that if they bowed to the boy's every whim, that he would remain loyal to the village. The bloodsacks can demand all they want, they have no power over me. The vampire hissed. She had offered to take care of the council members a few years ago, but Hiruzen had brushed it off as a joke, citing that he didn't need the extra paperwork. Very well, Ms. Tepes. Hiruzen sighed once more. I do believe it should be Mrs. Tepes now, or to be exact, Mrs. Uzumaki. Cruel teased with a grin. You may have turned him and claimed him as your mate. The elder man chuckled in a joking manner. But you two are not married yet. Speaking of which, that brings us to another problem. You mean that aside from the boy's own heritage, she gave a knowing grin. Naming him the heir of my house as well as revealing his newly awakened bloodline, he will be put into your Clan Restoration Act. Exactly, the Hokage stated. I have already discussed this topic lightly with Naruto-kun, though for different reasons. Cruel replied. He is allowed other mates, but he will choose them, not anyone else. Also, be aware that any future mate of his will also be turned. Hiruzen paled slightly at that. Fear not, the vampiress smiled, seeing his reaction. While I want my family to grow to its former glory, it is something that must be done slowly and gradually, otherwise it risks imploding upon itself. I see. The elder man nodded, relieved that he didn't have to worry about an army of vampires sweeping across the village in a feeding frenzy. Now, if there is nothing else, I must be going. Cruel commented as she turned on her heel to leave the office. Wait, Hiruzen called out. Just one more thing. Yes? Can I see him? I will bring him by tomorrow afternoon. Cruel replied. Though just so you know, he is aware of who his parents are now. Not waiting for a reply, the young vampiress dispersed into a cloud of black smoke and mist, leaving the elder village leader to ponder over her parting words. He knew Naruto was going to want answers as to why he had lied to him throughout the years. He only hoped his answers would satisfy the boy. With Naruto, the newly turned vampire sat at the foot of the bed he had been resting in complete silence as tears streamed down his face. Yoko had not just told him about his parents and their last moments, she had used an ancient jutsu to share her memories of that fateful night with him. For better or for worse, she had not hidden anything from him, even her part in his parents' death. Something the Kitsune woman felt a great sense of guilt over, since she had regarded her former container as a friend. Sister even. Kneeling down in front of him, she placed a comforting hand on his cheek, prompting him to look into her scarlet eyes. I am sorry for all the pain I have caused you during your life. Yoko began as she hung her head in shame, allowing her hand to drop to her side. It's my fault that you're hated, and it's my fault that you're an orphan. Naruto didn't react right away until he heard sobs coming from the red-haired woman before him. Looking down at her, he could see her shoulders slumped, shaking each time she sobbed. Seeing this, his heart clenched. He always hated seeing women cry. Sliding off the foot of the bed, he knelt down next to her. Reaching over, he brought her into a comforting hug. Shish, it's okay, Yoko-chan. He whispered into her ear. It wasn't your fault. Sure, one could argue that he should hate the crying woman in front of him for causing the death of his parents and for being the reason the villagers hated him as they did. But when he viewed her memories, he could feel everything she felt at the time. Including the crushing guilt she felt as she gazed upon his mother one last time before being sealed within him. But, no, it was that Uchiha bastard's fault, not yours. Naruto stated firmly, before his eyes flashed the same scarlet color as Cruel's for a split second, signifying his newly found vampire heritage. And I promise you, we will kill him for the pain he has caused both of us. Yoko said nothing as she sniffled before raising her head to gaze into his eyes that had now returned to their beautiful cerulean blue color. Regardless, the Kitsune woman stated, to make up for the pain I have caused you, intentionally or not, I, Yoko Kurama, Godem Kyubi no Yoko, swear myself to you, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze as your slave and servant. Yoko-chan please, Yoko pleaded. Let me do this, to make it up to you, and so that I may fulfill my promise to Kushina-chan. Fine. Naruto relented, seeing that the Kitsune woman was not going to be swayed from her choice. But I will not treat you as anything less than a friend. That is acceptable, Naruto-sama. Yoko replied, causing the blonde to groan. None of this sama stuff, please. The blonde sighed. Just Naruto, or if you absolutely must use a suffix, use san, or even kun. Very well, Naruto-sa-kun. She quickly corrected herself, though sporting a light blush. Come on, let's get up off the floor. Naruto stated as he stood up. However, before the blonde to help the red-headed woman to her feet, he was engulfed in a crushing hug from a rather emotional purple-haired kunoichi who was crying hysterically into his chest that nearly knocked him back down to the ground. Much to the Kitsune woman's surprise at the sudden intrusion. Anko-chan? Naruto stammered as he recognized the purple-haired woman that was crying into his chest, wrapping her in a firm hug as he buried his face into the crook of her neck. Hey Whiskers. She smiled through tear-stained eyes. Moments earlier, the sight that greeted the snake mistress was not a welcoming one when she arrived in the alleyway the Hokage had described. Her features now returned to normal, her hair tied back up into her traditional fanned ponytail. Immediately, her nose was assaulted with the scent of blood, urine and burning flesh. What frightened her though, was that she could smell that Naruto had been in this location, causing her heart to sink as she approached the wooden fence. Reaching up, She ran her fingers along the holes that had been punched into the wood. Feeling a wet substance, she pulled her hand out and looked at it to confirm her fears. It was blood. Clenching her eyes shut as tears threatened to spill out, she turned and leaned her back against the fence, ironically in the same exact place Naruto had been the night before. Opening her eyes, she observed the ground. She could see fragments of broken bottles, and even some discarded shinobi weapons, but what really stood out to the snake mistress was the sheer amount of blood that stained the ground. It was far too much to be from one person. Hell, it looked like it had been spilled from nearly half a dozen people. Kicking herself up off the fence, Anko began to look for any evidence as to who did this, and more importantly, where Naruto could have gone to from here. "You look like you're looking for someone," a voice asked from behind her, prompting the snake mistress to whirl around to face the newcomer, only to be greeted by the sight of a pink-haired young teen, looking no older than herself standing atop the wooden fence. "Someone dear to you, perhaps? The hell you talking about?" Anko glared at the pink-haired teen, getting into a defensive stance. She didn't know why, but upon seeing this girl, her instincts screamed to the snake mistress to beware of this newcomer. Something about the pinkhead just oozed a predatory lust for the hunt. "Let me guess." The pinkhead giggled playfully as she jumped down from the fence she had been standing on, prompting Anko to jump back. "You're looking for your whiskers." Upon hearing the pinkhead utter her affectionate nickname for the blonde boy, Anko launched herself towards the newcomer, attempting to grab her by the throat, only for the pink-haired girl to blur out of focus and reappear behind her, causing Anko to slightly stumble over her own feet due to the sudden lack of her target. Turning around, she was greeted by the smirking form of the pinkhead before she restrained both of Anko's hands and pinned her to the fence with an unnatural strength. "What did you do to Naruto-kun?" The snake mistress demanded defiantly, despite her position. "I can see why you hold a special place in his heart." Cruel grinned as she stared into Anko's eyes, seeing the snake mistress remain unflinching. "Where is he?" "Fear not, Anko Mitarashi, famed snake mistress of Konoha." The pinkhead grinned, releasing the snake mistress from her hold. "Your whiskers is safe at my estate right now." Anko calmed just slightly upon hearing that her favorite little blonde was safe. Though she was confused as to how this girl knew so much about her and Naruto, even calling him by her nickname that she only said to him. Not even her fellow Ice Queens were aware she referred to Naruto by such a name. That was her name for him. "You should know that I saved him last night, in this very spot." Cruel explained as she took a few steps back from the snake mistress. These pathetic fools attempted to avenge the Yondaime by committing cruel acts against the boy. Hearing this, a growl rumbled from the snake mistress's throat. "I took care of the trash." The pinkhead continued, "Though I'm afraid by the time I arrived, the damage done was too severe to heal from by traditional means. So, I changed him." What do you mean you changed him?" Anko asked, her voice shaking. "I changed him into the same thing I am." Cruel grinned, turning to face the snake mistress. "And what is that?" "A vampire," she bluntly responded, before grabbing the snake mistress and disappearing into the same black smoke and mist she had used previously within the Hokage's office, feeling she had toyed with the purple-haired woman long enough. In her eyes, Anko had passed her test and proved herself worthy. The snake mistress had looked her in the eye, and despite being at a severe disadvantage, had refused to back down, showing what lengths she would go through for the blonde Jinchuriki. Tep's estate. In the blink of an eye, Anko found herself in a large luxurious room that appeared to be a living room of sorts, judging by the furniture that were spread across the room in an organized fashion. Taking a moment to catch her bearings, she caught sight of the pink-haired girl that was in the alleyway with her rounding the corner, prompting the snake mistress to take off after her. Though despite being right behind the pinkhead, by the time Anko had rounded the corner, said pinkhead was all the way down the massive hallway, waiting for her. Growling to herself, Anko took off at full sprint, using her chakra to propel herself down the hallway. Though like before, the pinkhead was gone down the hallway once more, though this time, she was standing in front of a specific door not too far from where the snake mistress stood. Narrowing her eyes slightly, Anko swiftly made her way to the doorway, though this time, the pinkhead did not move. Silently, the pink-haired girl opened the door, revealing a blonde-haired boy just now standing up. Immediately recognizing who it was, Anko launched herself into him, gripping him in a tight hug as she buried her face into his chest as tears fell freely in relief upon seeing him safe and healthy. Forgotten what was told to her in the alleyway. Anko-chan? The blonde boy stammered as wrapped his arms around her, giving her a firm hug as he buried his face into the crook of her neck. Hey Whiskers. She smiled through tear-stained eyes. You have no idea how worried I was. It's okay hubby-chan. Naruto smiled, slightly tightening his hold on her before turning his attention to his pink-haired sire and mate. Thank you Cruel-chan, for bringing her to me. I knew she meant a lot to you, Naruto-kun. The pink-cat responded as she entered the room fully. And if I didn't, she would no doubt rip the village up of its foundation to find you. Damn right I would. Anko sniffled, lifting herself from the blonde's chest before turning to face the pink-haired vampire. So your name is Cruel, huh? That is correct, Cruel Teps at your service. The vampire gave an exaggerated bow. And as I said, I am a vampire. So that means. Anko began, looking to the blonde she was still holding, remembering what Cruel had told her when they were in the alleyway. For his part, Naruto didn't know how to respond. While he had talked with Yoko, he had come to terms that he was no longer human, but he didn't know if he could bear it if Anko would reject him. She had been his anchor the past few years, his pillar of support. Yeah Anko-chan. Naruto sighed, looking down at the floor, feeling a bit ashamed. Cruel-chan turned me into a vampire to give me a second chance at life after last night. I'll understand if you don't. He never got to finish as the snake mistress already picked up where Naruto was going with his speech and slammed her lips into his to shut him up. She refused to hear him spout such nonsense that she would abandon him over something so small and insignificant. To her it didn't matter. Breaking the kiss, she peered into his cerulean blue eyes and smiled. Don't you dare even think I would abandon you for something so small as this. The snake mistress stated firmly. So you've gained a blood fetish like me, so what? Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at this, feeling as if the weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders. Standing up, Anko looked to where Cruel stood. You changed Naruto-kun, can you change me? The snake mistress inquired, much to the shock of Naruto. Some sort of test I need to pass? Kill someone? What, Anko-chan? Naruto asked softly, prompting the young woman to turn her attention towards him. We promised we would always be there for each other, Naruto-kun. She stated. If you're a vampire, I am going to be one alongside with you. You are correct, there is a test. Cruel smirked. But you already passed that in the alleyway we met in. However, no, I will not change you. What? Anko exclaimed. But you said? I won't change you. The vampiress interrupted. But he will. Her eyes locked onto where Naruto stood, frozen in place, unsure of what to do as all the attention was turned to him. Slowly, Anko made her way to him. Her eyes pleading to him to let her be with him. To help him carry this curse, this gift alongside him. What do you mean, me? Naruto stammered. You do intend to take her as a mate, do you not? Cruel stated bluntly, earning a blush from the blonde boy and a teasing grin from said snake mistress. Oh? Anko grinned. Has my little foxy-kun been having naughty thoughts about his hubbyheim? This only served to cause the poor boy to blush even further, much to the amusement of the snake mistress. But, I don't know how to turn someone. Naruto pointed out, since he has only been a vampire for less than a day. You do, you just haven't realized it yet. Cruel informed the blonde vampire. Remember what I told you when I had you feed from me earlier. My blood holds the knowledge to do such things, you just need to focus on it. Slowly nodding, Naruto turned to face Anko once more, whom was now baring her neck to him. Seeing this, he could feel In's fangs lengthening in anticipation. Closing his eyes, he leaned in and gave the base of her neck a light kiss before opening his mouth and sinking his fangs into her warm flesh, earning a pleasured moan from the snake mistress. His eyes shooting wide open as the crimson fluid flooded his mouth, though he couldn't help but taste a very slight hint of dango within her blood, causing him to mentally smile in response. Along with the flavor, various memories of the snake mistress began to seep into his mind. Blurry visions of her time as Orochimaru's apprentice before his betrayal. The villagers looking at her with scorn for the actions of another, similar to him. As well as other memories, such as some of her knowledge of taijutsu, ninjutsu, and other skills. After nearly 2 minutes, Naruto released his hold on the purple-haired kunoichi, taking deep breaths before noticing how deathly pale she looked. On instinct, Naruto bit the inside of his cheek, similar to how Cruel did, and leaned down. Placing his lips on her cold lips, urging them open as he allowed his own blood to pour into her mouth. Blood that she eagerly accepted and greedily swallowed. Looking down at his handiwork, Naruto watched as the snake mistress smiled one last time before closing her eyes and letting the darkness claim her. Hiruzen swallowed thickly as he gazed at the four figures that stood before him, a mixture of relief and anxiety swirling within the elder man, as well as a healthy amount of concern. Before him stood the boy he had thought of as his own grandson, now forever changed thanks to the ignorance of his own village that couldn't look past their own petty grievances and realize that they had been attacking an innocent child. Though he could see now that the boy seemed to be more centered now than he previously was. Not as jittery. Hanging over the blonde vampire was none other than the snake mistress herself, an arm draped over the boy's shoulder as she rested her own on top of his, as she stood a good foot taller than he did. However, Hiruzen could see that there was something different about her that he couldn't quite put his finger on, other than the fact that she seemed to have a more intimate connection with young Naruto, judging by the way she was hanging over him. Even more so than she did before, and the elder man swore he could see a slight yellow glow in her eyes when a shadow would pass over them. Not to mention, there was something different about her, though very subtle. To the boy's right, was the elder vampire herself, standing in a relaxed posture in her usual attire. Naruto's sire, and as he understood it, the boy's mate as well. The Hokage was still unsure how he felt about it, but he knew there was nothing he could do about it. The change was permanent. His only piece of solace he could take from this, was that the elder vampire had not orchestrated the attack on Naruto, she had merely given him the means at a second chance at life. As odd as it sounded. Lastly, there was the beautiful red-haired woman standing to the boy's left. Her physical appearance looked to be a mixture of Mito and Kushina Uzumaki. Part of her vibrant red hair was tied up into two side buns, while the rest of it ran down to the middle of her back, tied into 9 separate tails. Her attire consisted of an elegant crimson red and gold battle kimono. Though the most standout features of her, was the fact she sported 3 dark whisker marks on each cheek, similar to Naruto's, and the pupils of her crimson eyes were slit. First off, let me say that I am terribly sorry for what you had to endure last night, Naruto-kun. The elder man sighed, hanging his head in shame for the actions of his own citizens. Though, it brings me great joy to see you well, considering what you have been through. I take it you've already heard about it, GG? The blonde inquired. Yes. Hiruzen nodded. Teps-san had briefed me yesterday of your current circumstances. How are you feeling, my boy? To be honest, I feel. Naruto frowned for a moment as he searched for the word that would best describe his current feeling. Complete. Complete? The elder man questioned. What do you mean? That would be the best way to describe how I feel, GG. The blonde smiled, reaching up and grasping the snake mistress's hand tenderly. I feel whole now. Maybe it's because my hubbyheim accepted to go on a date with me, or perhaps it's because Cruel-chan has given me a family in a sense. Could even be that I finally know who my parents are. The last part made Hiruzen freeze in his seat as his blood ran cold. Immediately, he turned his gaze to the pink-haired vampire only to see her shaking her head, signifying that she didn't tell the boy about his heritage. How did you find out? The elder man asked, fearful of the boy's reaction that he had kept such a thing a secret from him. I told him. The red-haired woman answered for the boy. And you are? Yoko Kurama, servant to Naruto-kun. The newly identified Yoko introduced herself. Kurama? Do you perhaps have a connection with the Kurama clan? Hiruzen inquired, noting the woman's last name. I do not, Hokage-sama. The woman replied. I see, are new to the village then? No, in fact I have resided within the village for a rather long time. Yoko smirked, unable to keep her kitsune nature of playfulness from poking its head out. To her side, Naruto was struggling to hold in his laughter as he saw what the vixen was doing. In fact, I've resided within this village longer than you have, Hokage-sama. At this, Hiruzen's eyes widened in shock from the woman's claim. Though before the elder village leader could voice his curiosity as to what the woman meant, Naruto had spoken up. Yoko-chan, please stop teasing GG. The blonde grinned. I don't think his poor old heart can take much more, it's beating fast enough already. I suppose I should stop beating around the bush. The red-haired woman conceded before turning her full attention to the elder village leader. I have given you my true name, Hiruzen Sarutobi, but perhaps you know me by my other name. And what other name would that be? The Hokage asked, narrowing his eyes at the woman. Instead of answering vocally, the red-haired woman allowed a wave of power to wash over her, as she dispelled the illusion she had cast on herself. As she did so, a pair of fox ears appeared at the top of her head, while 9 separate vibrant orange tails flowed out fluidly behind her with an elegant beauty, each with flawless white tips. The whisker marks that adorned her face now becoming far more darker and more prominent than before. Lastly, her eyes seemed to faintly glow with demonic energy, giving her a terrifying, yet beautiful appearance at the same time. Seeing the woman's change of appearance, Hiruzen felt all the color drain from his face as he realized who, or rather, what was standing before him in his very office. Kyuubi, he stammered, swallowing thickly before slowly turning to Naruto for an explanation. I assume you would like an explanation as to why she is out of the seal. The blonde stated, earning a slow nod from the elder man. To put it simply, when Cruel-chan changed me, I died. Kind of part of the process in order to be reborn. And when Naruto-kun died, the seal released me. Yoko added, turning the attention back to her. You see, when Naruto-kun's father used the Shinigami to seal me away, he did it so that my soul would be tied to Naruto's. However, since Naruto-kun's soul did not pass on, I remained here. Hiruzen could only nod dumbly at the explanation given to him, all the while cursing his own ignorance for allowing Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki to be leaked out by the council like it did. He had hoped that Minato's final wish would have been fulfilled and his son be seen as a hero simply for keeping the fox at bay, but that had not been the case. Immediately after the boy's status had been leaked, the civilian council had called for the boy's head, an infant no more than a few hours old. It had made the battle-hardened war veteran sick to his stomach, as well as various members of the Shinobi Council to see the mob demand the death of an infant. It was then that Hiruzen had passed his law that no one was to speak of the boy's status. But the damage had already been done, and the seed of hate planted. Now, he had the very same fox, albeit in human form, standing before him, proudly displaying her tails and other fox-like features. Though the question that was at the forefront of the old mont's mind was what would the vixen do now that she was free of her seal? You worry if I plan to continue my attack from 10 years ago. Yoko stated bluntly, as if reading the village leader's mind. To be honest, I had no intention of attacking that night. I was content during my time as Kushina-chan's tenant, and was looking forward to seeing her raise young Naruto-kun. However, a Uchiha claiming to be Madara ripped me from her seal and placed me under his control with that cursed Sharingan. Hearing this, Hiruzen's eyes went wide in shock. He had heard whispers that the Uchiha were behind the attack, but all those ceased after Itachi massacred the clan and left his younger brother mentally scared as he was forced to witness the massacre over and over again for 72 hours. After that, most of the citizens, and even members of his own council, namely the civilian and elder council members, began to pity the boy who had lost everything, bowing to his every whim in hopes to keep him loyal to the village. It may be surprising to learn, but Kushina-chan and I had a great relationship between Jinchuriki and Biju. Yoko continued, snapping the old man out of his thoughts. Far better than Mito Mainu and I ever did. Mito Mainu considered me a pet to be paraded around. Kushina-chan saw me as a friend, a sister even. It tore me apart when I regained my consciousness, to see her impaled on my own claw. Hearing the pain in the vixen's voice, Naruto moved out of the snake mistress's embrace and brought the red-headed woman into a comforting hug, knowing that the Kitsune woman still felt a great amount of guilt in his mother's death. After a handful of seconds, the vixen composed herself once more before turning her attention back to the Hokage. Anyways, Yoko sniffled slightly. Once Naruto-kun was turned, I swore myself to servitude to him. To make up for the suffering he had to endure for my actions, and to keep a promise I made to Kushina-chan. Saying her piece, the Kitsune woman reeled in her fox features, returning once more to a more human look. Having heard everything, Hiruzen was a bit more relaxed about the Kitsune running free. Now it was just a matter of keeping her identity under wraps, unless it was absolutely necessary to be revealed. He wouldn't make the same mistake as he did with the boy's status. The last thing he needed was for it to get out that the Kyuubi was walking free and have some ignorant group try and finish what the Yondaime had started. Very well. Hiruzen stated after a handful of seconds. If anyone asks, the official story is that you are a maid in service to the Tep's estate. There will be less questions that way. That is acceptable, Yoko replied. However, the Hokage sighed. In order to keep her identity a secret, I'm afraid you will have to continue to act as if you are still the Jinchuriki. I understand that continues to make you a target, and I apologize for having to ask you to put yourself in such a position, but I understand, GG. The blonde interrupted. However, I will warn you, my days of just forgiving and forgetting are over. While I won't actively seek out vengeance against those that have wronged me, I will defend myself by any means necessary, counsels be damned. Hiruzen could only nod in acceptance. He couldn't, in good conscience, ask the boy to merely turn the other cheek like he used to. No, the boy was well within his right to defend himself from now on. Though, he did hope against all odds that the young blonde vampire wouldn't need to. Especially not after Cruel had dispatched the mob the other night. No doubt word had already spread that those involved with the attack on the boy had been massacred. Of course, this was a double-edged sword, as it would make the family and friends of the mob hate the boy even more. However, they would hesitate to chase after him due to the massacre. That is more than understandable, Naruto-kun. The old man sighed, before moving on to address another issue. About your parents, I am sorry for lying to you all these years. I know that it ate you up inside, wondering who they were. It's just, they had lots of enemies between the two of them, I know. Naruto interrupted once more, earning a nod from the elder man. Though can't help but think I would probably be safer in the middle of Iwa than here. Hiruzen couldn't help but to flinch at that comment, reluctantly agreeing that the boy was possibly right. But, I understand your reasoning, even if I think you could have handled it better. The blonde continued. Instead of trying to avoid it, you could have simply told me that you would tell me when the time was right, but above all, you could have told me that they loved me. You're right, Naruto-kun, the old man conceded. I could have handled it a lot better, instead I took the easy way out. So now that Naruto-kun is aware of his heritage, Cruel chimed in. Did his parents leave him anything? Unfortunately, their home itself was destroyed during the your attack. Hiruzen stated, giving a shy gesture towards the kitsune woman. But, I had managed to salvage their personal effects. Chief among them, was your inheritance. As he explained this, the Hokage got up from his desk and walked over to one of the many pictures that decorated the office walls. Ironically of Minato himself. As he removed it, a safe could be seen that had been hidden behind the painting. After a few seconds, Hiruzen opened the safe and retrieved a small stack of scrolls before returning to his desk. In his dying breath, Minato had requested that you not be given these until you reached the rank of Chunin, though I doubt he took into account of Ms. Yoko, informing you personally of your heritage. Hiruzen stated, before turning to the kitsune woman. Forgive me, it is going to take some getting used to you being free. Yoko merely nodded in acknowledgement. At any rate, these are yours. The elder man informed the blonde vampire, before handing the boy the small stack of scrolls. 2 of those are your parents' savings. Neither of them trusted the village's banking system, only leave pocket change in their accounts. The others contain various fuinjutsu scrolls as both of your parents were masters of the craft, though Minato would never openly admit it. Your mother far exceeded him in the art. Little secret, Kushina-chan was the one who designed the seals for the Yellow Flash's famed ability. Yoko grinned, earning a shocked expression from the Hokage. Though he does get credit for coming up with the idea, Kushina-chan merely made it practical. I see, was Hiruzen's intelligent reply. Anyways, I believe that is everything. Actually, there is one last thing. Cruel spoke up, catching the village leader's attention. What is it, Ms. Teps? Well, thing is, the Teps clan has a few more mouths to feed. The pink-haired vampire smiled. As such, we need to stock the fridge so to speak. Hiruzen frowned at her wording. While he trusted the elder vampire, her word use in describing her food source was still a little unsettling. Unfortunately, the prisons are low on inmates set for execution. Hiruzen frowned, as he tried to come up with a solution for the problem he was now faced with. However, something struck the elder man as odd. Cruel had mentioned mouths, as is more than one. As the realization dawned upon him, He slowly turned towards the snake mistress that had retaken her spot hanging over the blonde. A sadistic grin spread across her face. "Yo, you turned her as well?" Hiruzen cautiously inquired, only for the pink-haired vampire to shake her head. "Nope," Cruel smiled. "She was turned by Naruto-kun here. Before you have a heart attack, old man, I asked for it," Anko stated before the old man popped a blood vessel. "We promised each other we would always be there for one another. So if Whiskers here was going to be a cute little bloodsucker, then I was going to follow. I mean, I already had a blood fetish, so why not take it up a notch?" "I see." Hiruzen frowned. "Well, as I said, the prisons are a little light on inmates slated for execution. And with the unfortunate events Friday evening, we're a little light on bodies." "What about those that are not incarcerated?" Anko inquired with a mischievous look in her eyes. "You're referring to the untouchables," the elder man stated, referring to a group of known criminals that roamed free within the village that were, as their name implied, untouchable. Due to their connections with members of the council and bribing of various shinobi within the village. Unfortunately, there had been absolutely no evidence tying the accused to their crimes, leaving the village leaders' hands tied, forcing the elder man to simply accept their presence as a necessary evil within the village. However, this new development may give him the means to remove this taint from his village. All the better if these four were to come across any evidence linking these individuals to their contacts within his council. "If you three are going to do this, it must be discreet," Hiruzen stated, turning deathly serious. "Do not drag it out and make sure there are no witnesses. Target, isolate, and eliminate. Get in, snack, get out." The snake mistress grinned. "No problem." Furthermore, the Hokage continued, choosing to ignore Anko's comment. "Should you find any evidence that links this group to any council member or shinobi, bring it to me. Should be fun." Cruel quipped with a smile, showing off her fangs. "I haven't hunted live prey in years." As he looked over the group before him, the elder village leader could see that the excitable young snake mistress was brimming with excitement at the prospect of hunting live prey, whilst the elder vampire looked rather reminiscent. Yoko had a rather impassive look, more akin to being apathetic, while Naruto on the other hand, looked to be a swirl of emotions, being that of excitement and nervousness. "Keep in mind," Hiruzen stated, catching the three vampires' attention. "Should you be discovered, I will be forced to disavow any knowledge of your activities and act accordingly as the Hokage of this village." "Don't worry, old man," Anko replied. "No one will even know we were there." Scanning the group, he saw that they were all resolute in their determination. Satisfied with their resolve, Hiruzen dismissed them from his office while pondering what the coming days would bring. He couldn't help but chuckle at the irony that in the effort to rid the village of the supposed demon, the ignorant citizens had only created more in his place. "I have a feeling I am going to be seeing a lot more paperwork," he commented to himself with a sigh, conceding to his fate. Monday morning. Iruka was absolutely giddy this morning. He had finally done it. He had finally avenged the deaths of his parents at the hands of that abomination. Even better, at least in his mind, with the demon Brad no longer in the way, perhaps Anko would finally give him a chance, since she had always vehemently refused his requests for a date. Sure, she may be nearly half his age, but the moment she put on the forehead protector, she became legal in the eyes of the village. Though, Iruka never understood why the Tokubetsu Jonin was attached to the blonde brat. She was a prodigy for Kami's sake, she needed to be with a real man, not some snot-nosed brat. Regardless, the brat was gone now. He would simply use this to his advantage and offer her a shoulder to cry on the next time he saw her. Grinning as he made plans to seduce the snake mistress, Iruka entered the classroom, with his partner Mizuki following close behind him. "Alright, quiet down," the scarred Chunin called out, not noticing that the class had already quieted down before the instructor had even entered the room. "I regret to inform you all that Naruto Uzumaki will no longer be with us. He suffered an accident over the weekend and is sitting right here." The blonde in question called out from his seat, putting the book he had been reading down. Seeing this, Iruka could only gawk at the sight before him as he felt his blood run cold. The demon brat was still alive, and even worse, it looked like nothing had even happened to him. Which only further confirmed that the boy was nothing more than the demon in human form to him. Naruto on the other hand, merely grinned as he took in the mont's expressions. He could hear Haruka's heart beating in an erratic pattern, indicating the man was angry and probably in disbelief that he was still alive. "Why, Haruka-sensei?" Naruto grinned. "You look like someone just walked over your grave." Scowling at this, Haruka ignored the blonde and proceeded to go through the roll call of all the students, before he continued with the day's lesson plans. Inwardly seething at the fact that the brat was still alive, and furthermore, openly mocking him. Meanwhile, as the time ticked away, a certain Pinkette was scowling at the fact that the blonde had ignored her all morning. Not once pestering her for a date, let alone greeting her with his usual, "good morning," routine. Not that she would ever give him the chance, since he was nothing compared to her precious Sasuke-kun. Still, she loved the attention the blonde showered over her, and hoped that it would make the Uchiha jealous enough to snatch her away from the blonde. Though she would admit that his clothing he was dressed in now looked far better than the abomination he wore previously. Gone was that orange jumpsuit monstrosity. Instead, the blonde now sported a pair of black Anbu-style pants, a pair of shinobi boots to protect his feet. For a top, he now wore a dark red mesh sleeveless shirt, that now exposed his developing muscles. The last part of his new outfit, loosely hung over the back of his chair. A simple black trench coat with blood-red inner linings. On the other side of the classroom, a certain blonde-haired girl was also musing over the new Naruto, and the changes the boy had displayed this morning. Though her musing were more curious in nature, rather than the selfish thoughts her former friend was musing over. Looking over her fellow blonde, Ino had to admit that there was now a sort of attractive allure to the boy that she hadn't noticed before. Perhaps it was his orange jumpsuit, or his loud-mouthed naivety that had hid it before. She couldn't really place her finger on it. All she knew was that there was just something about Naruto that now grabbed her attention. Towards the back of the classroom, another girl focused her thoughts on the blonde Jinchuriki. Unlike the others, she had the unfortunate privilege to witness the attack on the boy over the weekend. Though she had left before the final blow had been delivered, unable to witness the death of the boy she had come to love ever since he had defended her from the group of bullies that had threatened to rip out her eyes. She had spent the entire weekend isolated to her room, grieving for the loss of her pillar of inspiration. When she had seen him enter the classroom this morning, she had been overjoyed. Almost crying out in joy, though she had immediately noticed something was off with him. Instead of the brashness he would typically display, he now seemed calm and focused. Activating her Byakugan, she could see that his chakra signature was far more dense than it had been prior, but also more solid. Instead of the two swirling colors of red and blue it was before that seemed to be vying for dominance over each other, it was now a solid purple. Silently, Hinata Hyuga vowed to find out exactly what had happened to her pillar. "Alright, we'll start off with some light sparring," Haruka instructed, as he ushered the students out of the classroom and into the training fields. All the while, scowling at the blonde boy. "You win by knocking your opponent out of the ring, or by rendering them unable to compete further. What styles are allowed?" one of the civilian students asked, as the young boy was eager to try out what he had learned from a certain green-clad shinobi. "All styles are allowed," Haruka absent-mindedly replied with a shrug. With that, the spars began, as the scarred Chunin moved down the list. Most went as expected, with the civilian students turning more into brawls than an actual spar between aspiring shinobi. However, the worst spar had to come from Ino and Sakura as it had quickly devolved into a catfight, complete with scratching and hair-pulling. Mostly from Sakura, as the pinkette had attempted to latch onto the blonde's hair to give her leverage. However, in the end, Ino had won by using a simple hip toss to send Sakura out of the ring, which unfortunately for the pinkette, ended with her landing face first into a fresh steaming pile of dog shit, left by Akamaru. "Will Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki please step into the ring?" Haruka called out, calling for the final spar of the class, and one he always enjoyed watching. Since every time, the Uchiha had always won handily. Especially since the blonde had no formal training in taijutsu. Smirking some, Naruto entered the ring, actually looking forward to this spar. He couldn't wait to knock the arrogant Uchiha down a peg or two. Thanks to feeding from his hubbyheim, he had gained an understanding of her snake style, and over the weekend, she had coached him in how to properly utilize it. To understand its discipline as Cruel had explained it. "Alright, gotta make sure I don't show more than I need to," Naruto mused to himself. stressing to hide his newly acquired vampire abilities. Just need to be a little faster than him. As the two students took their sides of the ring, Iruka watched as Naruto adopted a stance he had only seen once before, making his blood run cold for the second time this day. As soon as the match started, the Uchiha had launched an all-out assault with his interceptor fist style, expecting to knock the Dobi out of the ring immediately. However, Naruto had evaded all the raven-haired boys' strikes much to the Uchiha's frustration. Meanwhile, Naruto would respond with his own counter-attacks, targeting joints and other weak and soft areas of the body, including the shoulders, elbows, knees, and stomach. Anko had even encouraged him to hit below the belt for max effectiveness in combat, though Naruto couldn't bring himself to do that to a fellow man just yet. After a handful of minutes, Naruto had succeeded in knocking the Uchiha out of the ring, much to the class's shock. Iruka, on the other hand, scowled at the boy's display. "Naruto, you are disqualified for using an unauthorized style," the instructor commented, earning a series of confused looks from the students. "But Iruka-sensei, you said all styles were allowed." Ino spoke up, a frown across her face. While she was disappointed to see Sasuke lose the spar, she wasn't as blinded by her crush to see the instructor of the class as showing favoritism towards the raven-haired boy, thus making her doubt Sasuke's status as being top of the class. Iruka scowled as he heard murmurings echoing throughout the students, many of which were focused on him showing favoritism towards the Uchiha boy. Smirking, Naruto walked past the scarred Chunin, pausing momentarily next to the brown-haired man before whispering something only he could hear. "I know." The blonde grinned, before walking off, leaving behind a wide-eyed Iruka as he understood the implication. Evening. Iruka grumbled as he made his way home after a long day at the academy as the sun begun to set over the horizon. What had started out as a good day had quickly deteriorated, all starting with the damnable blonde brat still being alive. Not to mention after the spars, many of his students were now doubting him and questioning his methods. Some of the even bolder ones flat out accusing him of favoring the Uchiha over the other students. Chief among them surprisingly was Ino Yamanaka, one of the raven-haired boy's top fangirls. In a hurry to get home and drown his daily sorrows in alcohol, Iruka absent-mindedly turned down a dark alleyway which acted as a shortcut to his place of residence. However, he would never make it home as his world suddenly went black as he was rendered unconscious from behind. The last thing he felt was his body being effortlessly lifted off the ground and carried off to some unknown location. After some time had passed, Iruka groaned as he regained consciousness. He attempted to rub his head, only to find his arms and legs had been secured to some sort of wooden table. Vainly, he attempted to struggle to free himself, but with no success. It was then that he was alerted to others in the room, when he heard a soft feminine moan coming from in front of him. Craning his neck forward to see, his eyes widened in shock as he took in the appearance of Anko and Naruto making out in front of him. "Wah!" he exclaimed, alerting them to his presence. "Ah, he's awake," Anko purred, as she licked her lips in anticipation. "Seems like it." Naruto chuckled as he wrapped his arms around the snake mistress's waist as she leaned back into his embrace. "You ready to play, hubbyheim?" "Oh, I've been looking forward to this." She grinned sadistically, gently prying herself from her sire and lover's embrace. "You hurt someone precious to me, Iruka." "No now Anko-chan," the scarred Chunin stammered in fear. "I don't know what you're talking about. So you deny your involvement of keeping my little whiskers late after class on last Friday, knowing full well what day it was?" The snake mistress stated as she slowly drew a kunai from her pouch, gently dragging the edge along the man's thigh, causing him to whimper in fear. No doubt, to give that pathetic group of bloodsacks time to set up their trap. "Aw," the man screamed out as Anko jammed the kunai into his thigh. "Aw," Anko chastised mockingly. "No lying, you see, I already know the truth. How you blame my little whiskers for your parents' death. How you deliberately hold him back and sabotage him just to stoke your fragile ego. Even today, you singled him out for using my style that I gave to him, yet you allowed other students to use other styles. Why is that?" she questioned, despite already knowing the reason. This was just to toy with the man. "I don't know what he screamed out once more, as Anko cut further into the man's thigh, causing a large amount of blood to seep out onto the wooden table below him. This wasn't missed to the snake mistress, as her fangs became elongated at the scent of fresh blood. "Seems you're a slow learner." The purple-haired vampire grinned as she moved down to the end of the table and began to crank a wheel that was located there. As she did so, Iruka could feel the restraints on his limbs begin to pull at his hands and feet, forcing him to stretch to his limit, much to his discomfort. "Wah, what are you going to do to me?" he choked out, fear evident in his voice. "Now where would the fun be if I just told you, when I could show you instead?" She grinned, showing off her fangs, much to the mont's horror. Slowly and methodically, she cranked the wheel even more. The more she twisted the wheel, the more Iruka groaned in pain as he felt as if his arms were about to be pulled from their sockets. After a few more cranks, that's exactly what happened as a loud popping sound was heard, followed immediately by the screams of pain from the scarred man. Anko, on the other hand, merely chuckled in delight at the Chunin's pain. "Scream all you want, Iruka." Anko smiled. "No one will hear you, no one will help you." From the side of the room, Naruto watched as his lover continued to torture the poor man. Part of him felt a sense of pity for the man's predicament, but that part was quickly snuffed out. Since part of feeding from Anko, Naruto had also gained some of the woman's sadistic personalities, thus, allowing the blonde to enjoy watching his lover work her craft. Somewhat finding himself aroused by her actions. For hours, Iruka's screams of pain echoed off the walls of the room they were in as Anko continued to work the crank of the table, slowly and painfully pulling the man apart, piece by piece. His left arm was the first to go, as it got ripped off at the elbow. Then his right hand that had come off at the wrist, before finally his legs. One of which came off at the knee, while the other at the hip. Leaving the poor scarred Chunin alive and in a lot of pain. Stepping up behind his lover, Naruto wrapped his arms around her one last time as he looked over her handiwork. A sadistic grin spread across his face. Much like her, his fangs were visible for all to see due to the scent of blood in the air. Though both vampires had refrained from feeding from the man, feeling as though his blood was contaminated by his own ignorance. "I'm afraid you are no longer fit for duty, Iruka-sensei." The blonde snarled, spitting out the mont's supposed title with venom. As he did so, Naruto ripped the kunai out of the mont's severed leg, before slitting Iruka's throat. Watching with a sadistic satisfaction as the life drained from the mont's eyes. I wonder who is going to replace him." Anko mused with a chuckle as the two left the room, leaving behind the dismembered body of Iruka. Naruto, age 13. It had been 3 years since the blonde had become a vampire, and overall, things have gone exceedingly well for him. Aside from additional skills and knowledge he had gained from feeding from the victims of their hunts, Anko, Cruel, and even Yoko had taken to training him in other areas as well. With the Snake Mistress, he had learned more advanced stealth and assassination techniques, as well as refining her snake-style taijutsu, so he could use it far more efficiently. Yoko had tutored him in the art of fuinjutsu, as well as lecturing him about his clans, the Uzumaki clan, rich history. Having been sealed inside 2 Uzumaki women prior to her current former host, she was well versed in the clan's history. Even if she didn't get along well with Mito, she was still able to access the woman's memories and knowledge. And with her time with Kushina only added to that knowledge. Aside from torturing the poor blonde with history lessons, the Kitsune woman had rewarded the blonde by teaching him her Kitsune-style taijutsu, which due to its focus on evasion and counters, blended perfectly with the snake style he was already using. But the most useful technique she had taught him was the Shadow Clone Jutsu, and upon learning the secret behind the technique, he abused the hell out of it to expedite his training. Lastly, there was Cruel, the vampiress that had turned him and introduced him to this new life. She had taken the task of not only training him, but also Anko in their vampiric abilities. From using their heightened senses to keep aware of the surroundings, to the use of the mist form to be able to slip into enclosed areas. An extremely useful ability all three had utilized when hunting down the various members of the Untouchables, which they had managed to clear out most of the infamous group, as well as getting the proof Hiruzen needed to arrest the council members that had protected the criminals, alleviating the elder village leader of a fair chunk of paperwork. Though it had raised some questions among the 3 elder council members as to how the old Fire Shadow acquired such evidence, since there had been no missions on or off the books regarding any corruption within the council. Now, the blonde vampire found himself leaning against a tree within the academy grounds as he pondered all that had happened the past 3 years. First and foremost was Uruka's sudden disappearance, which had caused a mild panic within the classroom as speculations flew through the air. Everything from the man betraying the village, to him having a gay lover in Iwagakure, which only made the blonde vampire chuckle at how ludicrous the theory sounded. The scarred Chunin would have no doubt rendered any date he had to sleep with his boring and bland personality. True, he had promised the old man that he wouldn't actively seek out revenge against those that had wronged him, however Enko made no such promise. Naruto was pleasantly surprised to see one Yugo Azuki, otherwise known as Anbu Neko as Enko had informed him, had replaced the man as instructor. Though the blonde could venture to guess that her tenure as an academy instructor was merely a cover for something else. No way the old man would waste such a skilled kunoichi for something as mundane as teaching a bunch of students. He would have to wait and see. The one good thing about her assignment to the class was that Mizuki had been unable to sabotage him any further, allowing him to rise up the ranks of the class so that he was now neck and neck with Sasuke in being the Rookie of the Year, not that he cared for such a title. Aside from that, he had noticed two other noteworthy occurrences within the classroom revolving around two aspiring kunoichi in the forms of Ino Yamanaka and Hinata Hyuga. He had noticed that the blonde Yamanaka heiress had taken an interest in him after his change, slowly moving away from being a Uchiha fangirl. Though she still continued the rivalry she had with Sakura, it was clear to the blonde vampire that she was merely going through the motions and that her heart wasn't in it anymore. On sparse occasions, the two would converse with one another, though these social interactions would generally leave the blonde girl with even more questions than she came with. Still, he had managed to get her to stop dieting, using his friend and lover Anko as an example. Knowing that the young Yamanaka was familiar with the snake mistress, since her father worked with the Tokubetsu Jonin in the T&I department and had met a handful of times when Anko had to deliver something personally for Inoichi to look over. Hinata on the other hand, had slightly distanced herself from him. While she still followed him around, something the blonde vampire found amusing, it was no longer out of admiration, but rather inquisitive in nature. As if she were trying to figure him out. She still spoke with him, though their conversations tended to be reserved only for greetings and short, to-the-point, correspondence. Naruto-kun. A gentle voice broke him from his musings. Turning, he was greeted by the sight of the beautiful Kitsune woman, under an illusion so as not to attract any unwanted attention. Yoko-chan, while it is always a pleasure to see you. The blonde vampire stated, causing the red-headed woman to blush slightly at the compliment. What are you doing here? Wordlessly, the Kitsune woman produced a small bottle, no bigger than 8 ounces, filled with a thick red liquid, making the young vampire's fangs twitch in anticipation. Cruel-chan had requested I deliver this to you, she stated as she handed him the bottle of crimson fluid. It's from her. Thank you, Yoko-chan. Naruto smiled as he uncorked the bottle and allowed the thick crimson fluid to travel down his throat, quenching a hidden thirst. Upon emptying the bottle, he handed it back to the woman. He had to admit, as much as he loved feeding from live prey, Cruel-chan's blood was by far the best he had ever tasted. Being so rich and sweet to the taste. Oi Dobi. A voice called out off to the side of the two, prompting them to turn to face the owner of the voice. A feral-looking boy around Naruto's age, with a white puppy on his head. A perverted look on his face as he eyed the red-headed woman up and down, taking in all of her curves. Who's the babe? Who she is no concern of yours, Kibbles. Naruto stated with a slight growl in his voice as he stood up from his sitting position, placing himself between Kiba and the Kitsune woman. Whatever, loser. The feral boy scoffed, turning his full attention to the red-haired bombshell. So what do you say, babe? How about you ditch this loser and come with a real alpha male? I guarantee you'll never want to leave me once I bend you over and dominate you. TCH. Yoko scoffed. A pathetic rud like you couldn't even get me wet, let alone get me off. Naruto couldn't help but openly snigger at the Kitsune woman's retort, as Kiba's face became red in anger and embarrassment. Akamaru, his faithful partner, whimpering slightly as he felt something powerful and primal radiating from the red-headed woman. You bitch. Kiba sputtered in anger, enraged by the woman's insult. Then I'll just have to put you in your place beneath me. Fearing his partner was about to do something incredibly stupid, Akamaru quickly vacated the feral boy's coat and scampered away, cowering beneath a set of bushes nearby. Whimpering in fear, Meanwhile Kiba, ignoring his partner's strategic retreat, launched himself towards the red-headed woman, fully intending on forcing the woman to submit to him. However, before he could even take 2 steps towards the duo, Naruto had disappeared from sight, only to reappear directly in front of him with a speed he had never seen before. The blonde's hand wrapped firmly around the feral boy's throat and in one swift motion, had brought Kiba up into the air, before choke slamming him into the ground, knocking the wind out of the poor Inuzuka. "Let this be a lesson to you, mutt," Naruto growled, his eyes flashing blood red for a split second. "Never speak in such a way to those I consider precious." Kiba could only groan in reply as the blonde vampire walked away from him, leaving the feral boy to crawl out of the hole he had found himself in. For her part, Yoko couldn't help but blush at how Naruto had defended her. His brutal efficiency in dispatching the so-called alpha male had stirred something deep within her. A buried instinct to find a mate to bond with. "Sorry about that, Yoko-chan." The blonde smiled at the woman. "You have nothing to apologize for, Naruto-kun," Yoko replied, forcing down the blush that dusted her cheeks, hoping the blonde had not noticed. "At any rate, I should return to the manor. I shall see you this afternoon, Naruto-kun." "I shall see you then, Yoko-chan." Naruto grinned as he watched the kitsune woman depart. I wonder what she was blushing for. Unknown to either of them, a pair of light blue eyes watching their encounter from afar. As Naruto retook his spot against the tree he had been sitting against to enjoy the rest of the lunch break, the figure watching him decided to act now. Maneuvering her fingers into a practiced position, she initiated her jutsu. Naruto's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before a small smile graced his lips. Naruto's mindscape. A foreboding feeling entered the blonde girl as she slowly navigated her way through Naruto's mind. It didn't help that the place looked like an abandoned sewer with thick fog blanketing the ground, coming up to her knees. Eventually, the pathway she walked came to an abrupt stop as what once appeared to be a gate of some kind loomed before her. The bars twisted and broken, and bent outwards, as if something massive and powerful had broken out of its prison. "What the hell?" Ino murmured to herself, inspecting the broken cage. "Forgive the mess." A smooth and suave voice spoke from behind her, startling the poor mindwalker as she whirled around to face her uninvited visitor, only to find the form of Naruto Uzumaki standing a short distance away. "I wasn't exactly expecting having company over, otherwise I would have cleaned up." For her part, Ino could only stare at the blonde boy before her, a blush creeping up on her cheeks as Naruto entered his mid without his usual trench coat he wore, allowing the blood-red mesh shirt he wore to display all of his growing muscles in all their glory before the young mindwalker, causing her to bite her lip in appreciation. She couldn't deny that her fellow blonde had filled out far more nicely than the stick that was Sasuke Uchiha. I was. The blonde girl stammered, unsure what to do as the blonde boy was not supposed to be allowed to interact with her while she used her mind-walking jutsu. "You were curious." Naruto finished for her, flashing her a charming smile, eliciting a small nod in confirmation from the girl. "What is this?" she asked, finally finding her voice as she gestured at the broken cage. "Ah, that," he mused with a small grin. "We'll talk about that later, but first, let me clean up this mess." "What do you mean?" Ino asked, before watching as Naruto simply waved his hand, causing the environment around them to ripple slightly before it began to alter its appearance and location. Instead of the sewer-like system they were in with the broken cage, the two now stood in the center of a massive courtyard as a full moon hung high within the air. Just behind them was a large fountain, except the water flowing from it was red and thick, almost as if it were blood. In the distance, a large manor could be seen. Very extravagant looking, almost as if it were ripped directly from an old horror film she used to watch with her mother when she was a bit younger, looking as if it had been well maintained. "Now then, Ms. Ino," Naruto stated politely, gaining the attention of the young mindwalker as he gently took her hand into his, dusting her knuckles with a light kiss causing her to blush. "How about we meet up later this evening to discuss this, say around 6. "Are you asking me out on a date, mister?" The young Yamanaka joked, more so to try and ease down the fluttering feeling in her chest. "It could be if you want it to be, my dear," he replied smoothly, causing the blush on Ino's cheeks to darken. "See you in class, Ino-chan." Without giving her time to reply, the blonde boy faded away. She then noticed the environment around her beginning to fade into a white light, signifying she being ejected from the boy's mind. However, despite her apparent failure at discovering anything new about her blonde counterpart, she couldn't help but feel a bit giddy at the thought of meeting the boy later, in a more private setting. With a smile, she allowed herself to be pushed out of his mind. Later that evening, Ino was making her way down the street, feeling a fluttering feeling in her chest as she made her way to the place Naruto had told her to meet him at. The Hokage monument of all places. Specifically, the head of the Yondaime, which she found slightly odd. Though she supposed there was a reason for it. With a slight giggle and a small skip in her step, she turned the corner. Once again, allowing her imagination to entertain her with various scenarios that could play out once the two blondes were alone. Some more romantic than others. So wrapped up in her musings, that she failed to notice two figures lurking in the shadows, stalking her as if she were their prey. With a nod to each other, the two forms quickly moved to corner the blonde girl as one moved quickly ahead, while the other stayed behind her. Once in position, the individual ahead of Ino swiftly pushed her into an alleyway with a dead end, ensuring there would be no witnesses as to what was about to happen. His partner coming up behind him, effectively blocking off her only escape. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded, glaring at the two men, hoping that she wasn't displaying the fear she truly felt. "Well, little lady," one of the men chuckled darkly as his eyes roamed up and down her young body. "You're going to entertain us for the evening. I'm not that kind of girl." Ino growled, her eyes scanning for a means to escape. "That's what the Uchiha brat says." The other spoke, stepping out into the light for her to fully see his face, causing her to gasp out in shock and stumble backwards. Blocking her path was none other than Mizuki, her instructor in the academy. Ino had always had a bad feeling about the man. The way he would leer at her and the other female students in the classroom, especially during the taijutsu spars between the girls. However, another piece of information stood out to her right now. "What do you mean, Uchiha?" Ino inquired, narrowing her eyes at the duo. "Did Sasuke put you up to this? That brat?" The other male shrugged as he stepped forward, showing him to be a Chunin the blonde Yamanaka heiress had not seen before. "Nah, he wouldn't want to sully his name. Now, why don't you put your mouth to good use?" To get his point across, he lowered his hand to the zipper of his pants, making it very clear what he was expecting her to do. The silver-haired Chunin beside the man mirroring his actions as the two slowly began to stalk towards the young blonde, prompting Ino to back away from the two, before coming to a stop as she backed into the wall that sealed off the alleyway. Fear evident in her eyes as the two drew closer and closer to her. Well, what do we have here?" A feminine voice echoed mockingly through the alleyway, prompting both men to stop in their tracks. "Why, it looks like we have a couple of wannabe rapists, my dear." A male voice echoed as well. Almost instantly, two figures materialized behind the two would-be rapist. The female sporting a fanned ponytail, while clad in a tan trench coat. Her arms quick to subdue the nameless Chunin, as she held him in a rear-naked chokehold, forcing his head painfully to one side as her free hand covered his mouth, giving the purple-haired woman access to his neck. Allowing her to bite down on his neck, eliciting a muffled scream from the man. Meanwhile at the same time, a blonde male appeared behind Mizuki, placing him in the same position his partner was now in. Wasting no time, the blonde also bit down into the neck of his captive, draining him of every ounce of blood he had, while also absorbing his memories and knowledge. Something he was going to have to sort out later, if the flashes he was receiving were any indication. Once done with the two men, the vampire duo dropped the bodies without a care before turning their attention to the horrified blonde girl whom was still trapped within the alley. Now with two vampires, stepping into the light, Ino's eyes widened once again in shock as Naruto's face came into view. Trace amounts of blood around his mouth. "Are you okay, Ino-chan?" he inquired, his voice sounding genuinely concerned for her, snapping her out of her shock. "Naruto-kun, you have some." Anko motioned around her mouth, gesturing that he had some blood there. "Oh, right," the blonde commented, quickly cleaning it away. "Thanks Habiheim." Naruto?" Ino stammered as she tentatively took a few steps towards the blonde vampire. Her mind still trying to process what had all happened in the span of a few minutes. "You? Take a deep breath and calm yourself, Ino-chan," the blonde vampire instructed. "You've been through a lot in a short amount of time. No doubt you have questions, and I promise, you will get answers. Upon hearing his words, the weight of what the two men were planning to do to her came crashing down around her, causing her knees to go weak as she stumbled forward, only to be caught by Naruto, allowing her to sob into his chest, as he wrapped his arms around her in a comforting fashion, whispering soothing, comforting words into her ears. "So, what do we do with these sacks of shit?" Anko inquired, gesturing at the two bodies lying on the ground. "He have anything of note?" the blonde inquired, rubbing the blonde girl's back as her sobs began to quiet down. "Few petty crimes." The snake mistress shrugged in an uncaring manner. "Pickpocketing and petty theft, nothing really of note." "What about that bastard?" "Oh, GG is going to love this." Naruto grinned with a dark chuckle, turning his head to look at the snake mistress. "Good ol' Mizuki here has secretly been meeting with none other than Orochimaru. Even had plans to steal the forbidden scroll for the pedophile. Damn, Hokage-sama is going to love hearing that." Anko commented sarcastically, knowing the old man was going to blow a gasket upon learning the snake bastard had a mole inside the village. "Wait," Ino shot up, looking between the two. "The Hokage knows about this?" The blonde girl gestured to the two of them, and the two dead bodies on the ground. "Why don't you go ahead and inform GG?" Naruto nodded towards the snake mistress, whom was now sporting a knowing smile. "After all, I did promise Ino-chan some answers." "Alright Casanova." Anko winked at her blonde lover. "Just don't do anything I wouldn't do." "And what exactly won't you do, Hubbyheim?" The blonde shot back with a grin. "You'll just have to find out for yourself, now won't you?" The purple-haired vampire winked before disappearing into a mist, much to Ino's shock. "Well, best if we don't linger here ourselves," Naruto commented before tightening his hold on the young Yamanaka. Before she could question what he was doing, she felt a cold wave wash over here as the world around her seemed to dissolve into nothing before everything became a blur of movement for her. Hokage Monument, a few minutes later. "So, you and Anko-san, huh?" Ino commented, breaking the silence that hung between the two of them since they had arrived at their current location. "Yeah," Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. "She's one of my girlfriends, happened about 3 years ago." "What do you mean, one of your girlfriends?" The blonde girl narrowed her eyes at her fellow blonde. "I swear, if you're a pervert playing with their emotions, I will mind fuck you so hard, you'll think your name is Yono." The blonde vampire merely shrugged off the young mind walker's threat. Known full well at her current stage, she wouldn't be able to do anything. The only reason she was able to get inside his mind earlier today was simply because he had allowed her to. "Nah, it's nothing like that. I leave the skirt chasing to that horndog Kiba," he replied as he took a seat next to the Yamanaka, overlooking the village below them. "While not official until I become a genin, I am the last of my clan, or clans rather. As such, the old man will be placing me in the Clan Restoration Act." Ino calmed slightly upon hearing his explanation. Being from an established clan herself, she understood the workings of the Clan Restoration Act, or CRA for short. For last surviving males, it was every pervert's fantasy, having a harem of girls surrounding them. It usually didn't end well for the women who were forced into it, as they were treated more as objects than human beings. It was even worse for the last surviving female clan members, as they were reduced to nothing more than a breeding stock with no say whatsoever as to who would help conceive. Either way, it was a loveless union. However, something about how Naruto and Anko interacted with each other made her feel that something was different. The young mind walker could see that there was love between the two known pariahs of the village. Perhaps a kindred spirit in one another. So, Naruto mirrored. "Who's the other girl?" Ino asked. "Is it that redhead that came to visit you earlier today?" "Who, Yoko-chan?" "Nah, she is someone I consider precious to me, but we're not at that level. Whether that changes in the future remains to be seen." The blonde vampire shrugged. "But to answer your question, my other girlfriend is Cruel Teps. And, she's the one who changed me." "Changed you?" the girl questioned, before it dawned on her. "You mean, you remember that day, 3 years ago Iruka held me after class?" he asked, giving her a clear picture as to when it all started. "Yeah," Ino nodded, recalling the day in question. "Iruka-sensei blamed you for knocking over the bookshelf, even though you were nowhere near it. It was unfair, because it was your birthday too." "Yeah," he nodded in agreement. "What you didn't know was that it was all a setup." Iruka had purposely singled me out to keep me as late as possible while a mob gathered with one purpose. To kill me. Hearing this, Ino's eyes widened as she let out a gasp in shock. You see, the Yondaime didn't kill the Kyuubi like everyone thinks he did, as there is no way to kill a being of pure chakra. Naruto explained, preparing to drop a massive bomb on his fellow blonde. So, he sealed it away into an infant child, born that night. You. The girl all but whispered as her mind digested the information she was being given. However, her mind quickly snapped to the broken cage she saw within the young teen's mind. The cage that held. It used to, yes. He nodded in confirmation. However, that night 3 years ago, the villagers nearly succeeded. They tortured me for hours before one moved in to deliver the final blow. A lightning jutsu to my chest. Shortly afterwards is when Cruel Chan found me at death's door. She gave me an offer, die or a second chance at life. So she changed you into a vampire? It felt weird for her to say it out loud, despite seeing the proof firsthand. What with Naruto and Anko both appearing out of nowhere when the two Chunin were about to rape her. Especially with the way both had dispatched her would-be attackers. I know, sounds weird, right? He chuckled. But, you walk in the daylight, and, first off, forget everything you've read or seen in movies about vampires. Naruto stated. The only thing that is true is that I drink blood, however, I can eat normal foods as well, which thank Kami for that. Could you imagine I would be if I couldn't eat ramen anymore? Ino couldn't help but giggle at this. You dork, of course you would be more worried about ramen than anything else. The blonde girl said, still giggling slightly. But what happened to the, you know? Is it free or something? She is free, yes. He replied, gauging the teenage girl's reaction. In fact, you saw her earlier today. For a moment, Ino narrowed her eyes before they shot open to comical proportions. That woman that came to you this afternoon. She exclaimed with a mixture of shock, fear, and a bit of excitement. Correct, Ino-chan, Naruto replied. As you guessed, Yoko-chan is the Kyuubi no Yoko. However, there is more that happened that night than many know. Now, you are no doubt going to ask how she got out if she is supposed to be sealed within me. Ino nodded in confirmation. Well, the Reaper death seal the Yondaime used linked my soul to the foxes. Short version, if I die, she dies. He continued. However, part of becoming a vampire involves dying in order to be reborn. Which created a paradox within the seal. I died, but my soul didn't pass on. So in the seal's confusion, it ejected Yoko-chan. The young mind walker remained silent for a handful of minutes as her mind tried to comprehend everything she had been told and rationalize it. First and foremost, the boy she had developed a crush on over the past 3 years was a vampire, and a hot one at that. Secondly, the Kyuubi was now free walking around the village. Does the Hokage know about, well, everything? Yeah, he knows. He replied. He knows about Yoko-chan, and he knows about me being a vampire, as well as Anko-chan. As well as anyone else I turn to bring into the coven. Cruel Chan has stated many times that she wants me to find compatible mates to bring into the fold to help bring her family back to its former glory. How does it work? Ino inquired, a bit curious about the blonde vampire's circumstances. Being a vampire, I mean. Well, as I said. Forget everything you think you know from books and movies. Naruto reiterated. As you have seen, I can walk in sunlight no problem. Holy ground has no effect whatsoever, and as Cruel Chan once told me, while extremely painful, getting staked in the heart will not kill me. Not to mention, I can pretty much regenerate from any injury. And drinking blood? Ino asked. You and Anko were talking about reporting something about Mizuki working for some traitor. Almost as if you could see his memories by drinking his blood. Very perceptive, Ino-chan. He smiled, causing her to blush at the compliment. Yes, by drinking someone's blood, I gain glimpses into the person's memories. If they are shinobi, I can also learn their techniques, so to speak. And early on, I had problems taking on the person's personality for a short amount of time. Anko-chan had a blast when I adopted her personality for a few hours after I turned her. Ino was quiet as she stared off over the village as night had fallen over it. Mulling over what she had just been told about her fellow blonde drinking blood, and the perks of doing so. She had developed a bit of a fascination with blood a few years ago, when her father had the great idea to take her where he had worked one day. Hoping to give her an insight to what he did within the T&I building. However, she was more focused on watching Ibiki and Anko work on a capture spy. Hard to believe that even then, the young snake mistress was a vampire then. Can you turn me? She finally asked, prompting Naruto to raise an eyebrow at her question. What about Sasuke? He inquired. Thought you were competing with Sakura for his heart? Ino could only snort at this, though she did only have herself to blame for continuing to put up the act. If only for her rival's sake. I could care less about the limp asshole. She huffed. I only continued that charade to push forehead along. In truth, I kind of had a crush on, well, you. For his part, Naruto was a little taken aback by her confession. While he knew the young mind walker had become curious of him, he was unaware that it had developed into an actual crush. Peering over at the blonde girl, he could make out a light blush adorning her cheeks. You are aware that in order to change you, I would have to drink from you and bring you to the Shinigami's doorstep. As such, I would learn your clan's techniques that you know. He explained. One thing he knew about the Yamanaka heiress was that once she had made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. After which, you will have to consume my blood, willingly given. He finished. Is it painful? She asked, turning to face him. Well, I couldn't really tell you. Had a hole in my chest with Cruel-chan changed me. He chuckled dryly. As for Anko-chan, unsure since she is a bit of a masochist herself. However, there is one last thing you should know. What's that? If I turn you, you will become one of my mates. The blonde vampire stated. Without a word, Ino turned to face him, removing her hair from the side of her neck closest to him. It was an unspoken invitation. Nodding slightly, he reached out and drew her into his warm embrace, bringing their faces mere centimeters apart, allowing cerulean to meet light blue, before he leaned in and captured her lips in a tender kiss, prompting the young mind walker to close her eyes and moan softly into the kiss. Leaving her lips, he trailed soft kisses along her jawline and neck before stopping and giving one last kiss before he sunk his fangs into her neck, allowing her crimson life blood to flow into his throat. As he did so, flashes of memories of her various confrontations with Sakura over Sasuke to the gradual shifting of her attention towards himself. Feeling her starting to go limp and cold, he released her neck and moved back to her face, seeing her eyes barely open with only a faint flicker of life within them. Biting the inside of his cheek to draw blood, he captured her lips once more, pushing his blood down into her throat. Watching as she swallowed it, picking her up, bridal style, Naruto disappeared into the night with the Yamanaka heiress in his arms. Though as he did so, one thought passed through his mind. Shit, Inoichi is going to kill me when he finds out. Hokage Tower, day of graduation. I request Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki as candidates of Team 7. The cycloptic Jonin stated, not looking up from his orange book. Hiruzen couldn't help but frown at the silver-haired Jonin's request. Team 7 is infamous of being comprised of the two top genin and the dead last of the class. The elder village leader pointed out. Since Naruto had claimed the title of Rookie of the Year, whilst Sasuke was the runner-up for the title, much to the Uchiha's frustration, Sakura had just barely edged out Ino for the spot of Kunoichi of the Year. Is there any particular reason why you are requesting 3 of the top students for your team, Jonin Hitaki? As a matter of fact, there is Hokage-sama. Kakashi replied, closing his book to give the elder man his full attention. First and foremost, as the only Sharingan user within the village, I am the only one qualified to train Sasuke when he awakens his own. After he does unlock his own Sharingan, there will no limit to what the boy could learn. As for the Haruno girl, she is essentially a blank slate as she has in her book smarts. She can literally become anything she sets her mind to. Be it a genjutsu specialist or a medic. As for Naruto, as the last surviving student of Sensei, I owe it to his memory to take care of the boy. Hiruzen mulled over what the masked Jonin's explanation, unable to find any deceit in the monk's words, though he still had an uneasy feeling. Still, with the extra training and instruction the boy had already received from Cruel, Anko, and even the Kyuubi herself, he was sure the young vampire would be able to take care of himself regardless of almost any threat that came his way. Not to mention the boy's other means of acquiring new abilities. I will take your request under consideration, Jonin Hitaki. The elder man finally answered, before turning to the other potential Jonin sensei. Now, Kurenai Yuhi. I, Kurenai Yuhi. request Hinata Hyuga, Naruto Uzumaki, and Shino Aburame as candidates for Team 8. The Genjutsu mistress stated, earning a glare from Kakashi. This team combination would make for a great tracking and assault team, with Hinata and Shino supplying the means for tracking, while Naruto could be the powerhouse of the team. Not to mention with his latest academic scores, Naruto could also offer a strategic mind to the team. Hiruzen could only smile softly at the freshly promoted Jonin. While she made a compelling argument for her team selection, the old Fire Shadow knew that she had a more personal reason for requesting the Uzumaki boy. Like Anko, the young Genjutsu mistress, along with the others dubbed the Ice Queens, adored the blonde. Though he was fairly certain that the only Ice Queen that was aware of Naruto's current status was Anko herself, for obvious reasons. You make a very compelling argument for your team, Jonin Yuhi. He replied, taking a puff from his wooden pipe. Like Jonin Hitaki, I will take your request into consideration. If I may, why don't you take Kiba Inuzuka for your team? Kakashi offered, hoping to sway the woman away from Naruto. His clan's taijutsu style will make him an excellent assault member for your team, and if I recall correctly, he is quite smitten with the Hyuga girl. Perhaps you should consider the Inuzuka for your own team, Hitaki. Kurenai retorted, as you seem to be focusing on a pure assault team anyways. At least I am attempting to balance my team to be well-rounded. Don't kid yourself, Yuhi. Everyone knows the only reason you want the boy is due to your personal attachment to him. Kakashi shot back, narrowing his exposed eye at the woman. Says the man who flat out said the only reason you want Naruto is due to your connection to your late sensei. The ruby-eyed woman rebutted. What is your plan for training him? So far, you've only given a detailed plan for the Uchiha. What of the Haruno girl? It seems the only one you are truly interested in training from your team is the Uchiha boy. You would do well to keep silent about matters you know nothing of, Yuhi. The masked Jonin glared. I owe it to Obito's sacrifice to train Sasuke, and I owe it to Minato-sensei's memory to take care of the Uzumaki boy. Enough, Hiruzen exclaimed, having heard enough of the two arguing over Naruto. Sorry, Hokage-sama, the ruby-eyed woman stated with a slight bow before casting a glare at the masked pervert. Now then, Asuma? The elder man turned to his son. Well, seeing as the Uzumaki brat is in such high demand. The bearded Jonin began with a slight chuckle. I'll go with reforming the Ino-Shika-Cho combination with their kids. Why fix what's not broken, right? Very well, I will take all of your requests into consideration. Hiruzen stated, eyeing each Jonin in the room. You will have my decision within the hour, you are dismissed. Both Kakashi and Kurenai cast each other a piercing glare before exiting the room, something that was not missed by the other occupants, causing the elder village leader to let out a sigh in exasperation. Good luck, Pops. Asuma chuckled before he departed out the door, leaving the aging Fire Shadow alone to look over the files of each the graduating members and genin hopefuls. In the corner of the room, a purple bat perched on the ceiling had witnessed the entire exchange. With a small squeak, it disappeared in a plume of smoke. Academy, classroom. Pale eyes swept across the classroom of graduates as the Hyuga heiress awaited for the pair of oddities to arrive. 6 months ago, Hinata had noticed both Naruto and Ino had begun to arrive nearly at the same time every morning, before going their separate ways. While the Hyuga heiress could simply mark it up as a coincidence of the two running into each other while on the way to the academy, it was not a coincidence that the young Yamanaka's chakra signature had changed drastically. What was once a pale light blue energy that ebbed and flowed through her body, was now a dark, blood-red color, with wisps of black flowing outwards. Heavy and dense, almost inhuman. Hinata wasn't the only one to notice the change in the young Yamanaka. A few rows down from where the Hyuga heiress was seated, was a pink-haired girl and former best friend, and now former rival for the last Uchiha's heart, Sakura Haruno. Just like the Hyuga, the pinkette had noticed shifts in her rival's mannerisms, as well as her posture and body language when she entered the classroom. Not to mention the girl's changes in how she associated with her fellow blonde. She couldn't put her finger on it, but Sakura knew that something had changed her former best friend. Especially over the last few months as the blonde-haired girl and slowly stopped competing with her for the Uchiha's attention. When Sakura had confronted her about it, Ino had merely shrugged her shoulders and stated that she had decided to focus more on her future career as a kunoichi, rather than chase after a boy. Leaving the pinkette speechless at the proclamation. Sakura, however, was cut from her musing as the individual in question had entered the classroom, prompting the pinkette to look towards the doorway. Without paying any heed to the numerous boys that had turned their attention towards her, Ino had quickly and quietly made her way to her seat, and as usual, Naruto had entered the classroom mere seconds behind her, causing the pinkette to frown. Sakura had noticed that the blonde Yamanaka had become more cordial to her fellow blonde over the months, which only served to feed the jealousy rising up within her. It had been 3 years since that morning. 3 years since the whiskered blonde had ceased pestering her for dates, leaving a sense of emptiness to linger within her. "Why do I smell blood?" The voice of Kiba sounded, catching the girl's attention as the feral boy sniffed the air curiously before slowly turning towards the blonde Yamanaka girl, eyeing her cautiously. "And why is it coming from you? Told you we shouldn't have stopped for a bite to eat." The whiskered vampire commented with a slight laugh, through the mental link he now shared with his fellow blonde. An ability created thanks to the knowledge he had received from Ino when he turned her, which had only expanded as the newly turned vampire had delved deeper into her clan's jutsu library. "Oh, bite me, I was hungry and that asshole had it coming." Ino scoffed in return. "Besides, it's your fault anyways for not taking me on last night's hunt. I believe I have bitten you already, my dear," Naruto retorted with a grin. "As for last night, your father was quite vigilante in his guard. I do recall him muttering something about a boy stealing his princess away." Ino could only mentally groan at her overprotective father. Of course, she couldn't deny that she was partially to blame for his reinvigorated vigil to preserve his little princess's innocence, since she had let it slip that she was truly interested in a boy, hoping to ease her father into the idea before she formally introduced him to Naruto. And now, her plan to ease her father into her having a boyfriend had cost her a night of hunting in delicious, fresh blood. "Kiba is still waiting for an answer, my little vampiress," Naruto reminded her, since she had been silent for a handful of seconds since Kiba's nose had pointed out the scent of blood coming from the blonde girl. "Hey, watch this," she replied with a sinister grin before she turned her attention back to the Inuzuka boy. "You had best keep your nose to yourself, mutt," growled the blonde vampiress. "And out of personal matters that do not concern you." Upon hearing the insinuation, Kiba quickly paled and backed away. Memories of his old sister beating him mercilessly when he had asked a similar question just a few years back, while his mother laughed up a storm at his cluelessness, not lifting a finger to save him from his embarrassed older sister. Something about needing to learn when and when not to open his mouth. "Sorry." The Inuzuka boy quickly apologized before retreating to his assigned seat, much to the amusement of a whiskered blonde, whom shot an approving look towards his blonde counterpart. "All right," a commanding voice sounded throughout the classroom, prompting all the graduates to cease their activities and turn their attention to their sensei for the past 3 years, Yugo Izuki. "Get to your assigned seats so that we can go over team assignments." Instantly, all chatter had ceased and each of the graduates were seated in their assigned seats, awaiting for the purple-haired woman to announce which teams they were to be placed on. Some, like Sakura, were silently praying to be paired with her destined love, while others were more concerned with how troublesome it was going to be in the future. First off, Yugo began, once the class had settled. "I would like to congratulate all of you for your accomplishments and announce this year's Rookie and Kunoichi of the Year." The former Anbu captain allowed silence to hang in the air for a brief moment, allowing the excitement and tension to build up. The Rookie of the Year is Naruto Uzumaki. As expected, hardly anyone applauded the whiskered blonde's achievement, with the exception of Ino, Shino, Shikamaru, and Choji. However, the young vampire didn't care, merely giving a bow in respect to Yugo and politely thanking her. "And this year's Kunoichi of the Year goes to Ino Yamanaka. Congratulations to the both of you. Now, from this day forward, you are no longer mere students, but full-fledged shinobi of Konohagakure. Each of you will be divided into a 3-man cell, a team. Each team will be monitored by a Jonin sensei, who will coach, guide, and instruct you as you become familiar with your various assignments." Minutes ticked on as Yugo began to list the various teams, some of which earned cheers of celebration of being assigned to a particular team with their friend, crush, or even due to being assigned their favorite Jonin, while others sported downcast expressions due to being separated from whom they had wanted to be on a team with. Now, Team 7 will consist of Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Sasuke Uchiha. Yugo read off, getting a silent nod from the Hyuga heiress, and a whoop of celebration from Kiba, and a grunt from the Uchiha. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kakashi Hitaki, better get comfortable. What does that mean, Yugo-sensei? Hinata inquired with a curious look. You'll see. The purple-haired woman smirked before turning her attention to the list. Shino Aburame, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki. You three will make up Team 8, your Jonin-sensei is Kurenai Yuhi. The only noise that came from the selected names was a low groan from the pinkhead, lamenting that Kami had forsaken her and tore her from her one, true love. Causing the whiskered vampire to roll his eyes at the girls over dramatic antics. Team 9 is still active. Yugo continued, ignoring the drama the pinkhead was putting on. Team 10 will be Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. Your Jonin-sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi. Your Jonin-sensei will arrive in an hour. Until then, you are free to chat amongst yourself, do some extra training, or get something to eat. Troublesome. The Nara boy groaned. They reformed the infamous Ino-Shika-Cho combination. What did you expect? The rotund boy next to him offered as he munched on a bag of chips. It was obvious it was going to happen the moment all of us ended up in the same class. Still troublesome. The boy yawned before turning his attention to their only female teammate and childhood friend, whom had her eyes closed. Figured you would be upset about not being on Sasuke's team, Ino. Opening her eyes, she peered over at the lazy Nara and simply shrugged. Guess it was too troublesome for you to keep up on current events. The Yamanaka chuckled. I haven't been chasing after the Uchiha for 6 months now. Decided to start focusing on my career instead of boys. Shikamaru merely grunted in agreement. Hey, Shino, Sakura. Naruto called out, catching the attention of his two teammates. Follow me, I know where to meet our sensei. Anko-chan told you, didn't she? Ino mentally questioned her sire. That, and I know how Nei-chan is. The whiskered blonde replied. Have fun, Naruto-kun. The vampiress mentally smiled. I'll see you later, Ino-chan. And how would you know where our sensei is? Sakura questioned, resisting the urge to call him an idiot like she had in the past. Well, I know her personally. Naruto replied with a shrug. She's like a sister to Anko-chan. Sakura flinched slightly, hearing the affectionate chan suffix that had so often accompanied her own name being attached to another woman's name, causing a small sense of jealousy to bubble up inside her. If you know where our sensei is, then we should make haste, Uzumaki-san. Shino spoke. Alright then, follow me. The Jasmine Dragon. So, get the team you wanted, Nai-chan? The snake mistress inquired, as she took a sip from her cup of tea. Got 2 out of the 3 I wanted. Kurenai sighed. Hitaki got Hinata. Suppose Hokage-sama had to make some sort of compromise. However, I have to say that I am not as disappointed as I thought I would be. Oh? Well, if I am being honest with myself, I kind of wanted Whiskers on my team over Hinata. The Genjutsu mistress admitted with a grin as she used the snake mistress's nickname for the whiskered blonde. I knew I never should have told you all my nickname for him. That's my name for him. Anko stated before she thought of something. But why would you want Naruto-kun over Hinata? Wasn't she like a surrogate daughter to you? She's changed. Kurenai sighed, putting her teacup down on the table. Over the past 3 years, she has become more distant, and while not exactly cold, she seems to be more isolated now, refusing to let anyone in. Something happened 3 years ago that caused this, but she won't say what. Anko remained silent as she pondered what the Genjutsu mistress had said about the Hyuga heiress. 3 years ago was also when Naruto was attacked on that fateful night, and as a result, was changed into the vampire he was today, which ultimately led to her being changed as well. Could the shy little wallflower have witnessed the attack on Naruto? The snake mistress narrowed her eyes in contemplation. The only thing I had managed to get from her one of the rare few times I could get her to talk, was that she was looking for answers about someone, but refused to say who. Kurenai continued, unaware of her friend's train of thought. Yup, she witnessed what happened that night. Anko thought to herself. But how much did she see? Guess I am going to have to find out. Suppose I should go meet my team. The Genjutsu mistress stated as she moved to get up. Don't want to develop a certain bad habit from a certain lazy, perverted jonin. However, before Kurenai could leave, She was stopped by the snake mistress, whom was sporting a knowing grin as she held up her left hand, showing a small snake wrapped around it, hissing into the young woman's ear, allowing the implications to set in, regardless if they were true or not. "Actually, they are on their way here," she replied, earning a raised eyebrow from the ruby-eyed woman. "Using your snakes to spy on them?" the ruby-eyed woman lightly chastised, merely shaking her head at her friend's antics. "I always keep tabs on where my Whisker-kun is," Anko teased. "And here they are." Upon saying that, 3 freshly graduated genin rounded the corner with Naruto in the lead, his black trench coat flowing in his wake, exposing the interior crimson-red lining. Behind the blonde vampire was Shino, whose face was barely visible through his oversized trench coat and sunglasses that hid his eyes. Pulling up the rear was a sullen Sakura Haruno, silently lamenting not being on the same team as her precious Sasuke-kun. "Habiheim." The whiskered blonde grinned as he approached the 2 women, greeting his mate and fellow vampire first before turning his attention towards the genjutsu mistress. "Nai-chan, or should I call you Kurenai-sensei now? It would be appropriate if you were to refer to me as sensei while we are on the clock, so to speak, Naruto-kun." Kurenai smiled at the whiskered teen, before looking to the rest of her potential genin team. "Now, how about you 3 sit down and join us?" Nodding, the 3 genin each claimed a chair of their own around the circular table, Shino taking the seat closest to Kurenai, while Sakura claimed the one just next to him. Naruto, however, was promptly pulled into Anko's lap, much to the genjutsu mistress's ire. "Anko, could you keep your hands off of Naruto-kun for 5 minutes? Kurenai sighed as she and the other 2 genin looked on as the snake mistress firmly wrapped her arms around the whiskered teen's waist, pulling him close to her. While the ruby-eyed beauty was well aware of the relationship between the 2 pariahs, she had hoped her sister-like figure would at least restrain herself long enough for them to get past the team introductions. Of course, this was Anko she was talking about. On the other side of the table, the lone pinkette could only witness the spectacle with a tinge of jealousy. Her inner persona finding it ironic that her outer persona had told the blonde teen countless times to just leave her alone, and now that the boy had done just that, she craved the attention he once showered over her. While Naruto wasn't rude to her outer persona by any means, he was simply apathetic towards her. Is this how he felt growing up? Sakura pondered, well aware of how isolated Naruto's childhood was. Her mother had encouraged her to become friends with the boy, but she had fallen in with the rest of the crowd and ignored her mother's advice. "I suppose we should continue on with our team introductions, before Anko violates my student." Kurenai relented, seeing there was no way to stop the snake mistress. "Guess I'll start off first. My name is Kurenai Yuhi," the ruby-eyed woman began. "I like genjutsu, my sister in all but blood Anko, even if she does act a little eccentric at times." This earned the snake mistress sticking her tongue out at Kurenai. "Anyways, as for the things I dislike, I abhor perverts and rapists. I also don't like those that think women are inferior to men and are only good for bearing children, and lastly, those that don't respect the art and true strength of genjutsu. As for my dreams, I hope to someday meet the right man to start a family with, and pass down my title as genjutsu mistress to my daughter." "I thought you were dating Asuma, Nai-chan?" Anko inquired with a raised brow. "Didn't work out." Kurenai sighed. "While I was planning for a future with kids and marriage, he only wanted to have fun. Though, at least he was upfront about it and didn't try to string me along like other guys have tried to do. Anyways, moving on, why don't you introduce yourself, Anko? Since I know you are going to be hanging around my team on your downtime. Don't try to deny it, Habiheim," Naruto commented, earning a pout from the purple-haired woman. "Fine, I am the and sensual Anko Mitarashi." Anko began, purring the last part into Naruto's ear while giving it a lick, causing a shiver to run up the whiskered vampire's spine, also causing Kurenai's eye to twitch. "My likes are Naruto-kun here, Cruel-chan, blood, and the screams of pain and agony from my playmates in the T&I department. Not to mention, you love the thrill of the hunt," Naruto added mentally, earning a silent chuckle from the snake mistress. "As for my dislikes, well, that is no small list. But at the top is traitors, rapists, and ignorant fools. My dreams, well, I am looking forward to killing Pidomaru slowly and painfully, before starting a family with my Naruto-kun here." Silence hung over the group for a handful of seconds as each of them, minus Naruto, gawked at the snake mistress. A little unsettled by her blatant love of blood and torturing people. However, what stuck out to the pinkette was how Enko's dream of building a family with Naruto. Is this why he's been ignoring me? Sakura mused with a small frown. Because he started going out with her? Moving on, Kurenai coughed, snapping the pinkette out of her musings. You're up, Naruto. Alright, the whiskered vampire grinned, leaning back into the snake mistress. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are my hubbyheim, cruel-chan, and learning new techniques. There was an underlying implication, which Enko had caught right away, prompting her to chuckle silently to herself, since the main way Naruto learned new techniques was from feeding from various shinobi and such whom were affiliated with the so-called untouchables. My hobbies include training, pulling pranks on various well-deserved victims, reading, and gardening. He smiled as he saw the shocked look wash across the various members of his team, as none would have thought the once hyperactive blonde would have such a hobby as gardening. My dislikes are perverts, rapists, traitors, those that are too arrogant, and a certain masked bastard. He continued with a scowl as he thought of the bastard that drove the lightning jutsu into his chest that night 3 years ago. As for my dreams, I simply aim to become a shinobi my parents would be proud of and start a large family and restore my clans. What do you mean clans? Sakura inquired with a confused expression on her face as she gazed at the blonde across the table from her. The old man is probably going to announce it after our team is official, so you'll have to wait for then. All I know is that it's going to be entertaining to watch. Naruto grinned before turning to the bug user on the team. I believe it's your turn, Shino-san. Very well, my name is Shino Aburame. Shino began in his monotone voice. My likes are bugs, my clan. My hobbies include reading, studying my clan's jutsus and bug hunting. My dislikes are those that needlessly kill bugs and pesticides. My dream is simply to expand my clan, by finding someone suitable to marry. Very good. The ruby-eyed woman nodded, before turning her attention to her last student. Your turn. My name is Sakura Haruno. The pinkette started but froze as she began to consider what her likes, dislikes, and hobbies were. Her initial reaction was to proclaim her love for her Sasuke-kun, but that thought died in her throat. With her rival no longer competing against her for the Uchiha's heart, her victory, if she could call it that, felt hollow. Especially considering the desired prize had shown absolutely no interest. My likes are reading, mostly romance novels and reading about Iryo jutsus. My dislikes are, well, I guess I don't really have any now that I think about it. Which was true. She couldn't honestly say she didn't like Naruto anymore, since he had adhered to her wish and had completely left her alone for the past 3 years. While Ino had ceased her pursuit of the Uchiha just over 6 months ago, so she had no reason to dislike Ino either. My hobbies are hosting tea ceremonies and flower pressing. My dreams, I don't know yet. She finished with a small frown. It seems since Ino-chan officially stopped chasing after the Teme, Sakura doesn't know what to do with her life anymore. Naruto mused through his mental link to Anko. Not surprising, since she put the prick above everything. The snake mistress replied to her lover. Still has fangirl tendencies though, going to have to get that out of her. I am sure you and Night-chan can handle that. He mentally grinned, earning a sadistic grin from the purple-haired vampiress. Each of you are truly unique individuals, some more than others, Anko. Kurenai fake coughed the snake mistress's name, causing said woman to lightly glare at her. Anyways, we will be meeting tomorrow morning at 7 to administer the real genin test. Real genin test? Sakura questioned, looking at her sensei in shock. Come on, you didn't think the test we took today was all that was required to be official genin, did you? Naruto inquired. If it were that easy, we would have not only the largest shinobi force in the elemental nations, we would also have the highest mortality rate as well, due to too many undertrained genin with false ideals of what it is to be a shinobi. Naruto-kun is right, the genjutsu mistress stated. The exam at the academy was just to see who had the potential. The real test begins tomorrow. Training ground 8, don't be late and be sure to eat a good breakfast. Saying her piece, Kurenai disappeared in a flurry of sakura petals, leaving the 3 genin and snake mistress alone. One by one, the 3 members that made up Team 8 slowly went their own ways, until it was only Naruto and Anko remaining. though it was clear the Sakura had wanted to lag behind, hoping to get some answers to her questions, though had opted to save it for tomorrow morning. Well, suppose I should get back to the T&I building, before Ibiki throws a fit. Anko sighed, not really wanting to get up, but she had her duty to fulfill. Oh, before I forget, keep an eye on that Hyuga girl. She may have witnessed what happened that night. Naruto nodded, understanding the implications of what was said. Explains why she keeps me at a distance now. The whiskered vampire mused before turning his attention back to his mate. Try to behave, will you, Anko-chan, and if you're a good girl, I'll take you out hunting tonight. Are you implying I am not a good girl? She grinned, pressing her body into him with a saucy grin. Naruto merely smirked as he captured her lips with his own, allowing his blood to flow into her mouth from a cut from his tongue that he had freshly done. As the crimson fluid touched her throat, the snake mistress let out a pleasurable moan. Seconds passed before the two separated, a glazed look in the woman's eyes. See you tonight, my hubbyheim. Naruto smiled, earning a grunt in confirmation. Wordlessly, both vampires disappeared into a cloud of mist, going their separate ways. Training Ground 13. Hatred burned in the exposed eye of one Kakashi Hitaki as he glared down from his vantage point up in the trees at the training field below as the first member of the now official Team 8, or as Anko had dubbed it, Team Fangs, entered the training field. To the cycloptic Jonin, the blonde whiskered teen that had just arrived was a mockery to the memory of his late sensei. Even more so after his failed attempt to avenge his fallen mentor 3 years ago. He had hoped to remedy that failed attempt by playing at the elder village leader's heartstrings, and get the boy placed on his team. From there, he had various plans for the demon's demise. One such plan, he had visualized, was to use the Haruno girl's obsession over Sasuke, by holding the Uchiha at knife point in a mock hostage situation and order her to kill Naruto, and if she had actually followed orders, well, all the better in his eyes. Should that fail, and the girl not succeed or refused to follow the order, he would have simply orchestrated a training accident between the Uzumaki and Sasuke. Of course, after ensuring the blonde was significantly undertrained while giving the Uchiha access to numerous higher-ranking Kaiden jutsu, as that was the Uchiha's natural elemental affinity, with very few from the now nearly extinct clan having affinity to other elements. Hitaki had also planned to use Sasuke's status of being the last loyal Uchiha, to avoid any consequences befalling him, unlike the Haruno girl, whom would have been stripped of her shinobi status and potentially imprisoned. Even if the girl's mother was on the civilian council. Lastly, if all else had failed, he would have ensured the boy's demise on their first mission outside the village. Either by allowing a bandit to deliver the final blow or even enemy shinobi to dispatch him, or do it himself away from the eyes of the other two and/or client, depending on what the mission would have been. However, all of his planning had been rendered moot, thanks to that red-eyed bitch. While Kakashi had taken into account that others, if only few in number, would show an interest for the blonde brat, he had disregarded them as a negligent factor, banking entirely too much on an emotional old man. Instead, Kurenai Yuhi, an up-and-coming Jonin Kunoichi, had derailed his entire scheme with a precise focus of logical assessments she had planned for her team as a whole, which admittedly, had made a far better case for her than he would have liked to admit. After the teams had been announced, Hitaki had attempted to coerce the famed Genjutsu mistress into swapping Kiba and Hinata, for Naruto and Sakura. Even attempting to goad her into it by dangling the Hyuga girl in front of her, as it was no secret that the ruby-eyed woman had viewed the girl as a daughter. However, much to the silver-haired Jonin's disdain, Kurenai had stood firm in her team. Kakashi had figured it had something to do with the snake whore that had constantly accompanied the team, and how said woman was constantly around the Uzumaki brat. "What are you doing here, Hitaki?" A voice broke him from his musing, prompting him to turn to face the person who had intruded upon his train of thoughts. "Anko," Kakashi replied evenly, as he peered at the snake mistress. While he had never thought highly of the woman before, due to her being the former apprentice of one Orochimaru of the Sannin, Kona his biggest traitor to date since Madara Uchiha. Not to mention the fact that the woman had aggressively turned down any man that dared approach her, all for a brat that was 5 years her junior. However, in the past 3 years, he could feel a sort of dark and predatory aura rolling off of her with the faint scent of blood whenever she entered the same room he was in, or if she was within close proximity, as she was now, making him feel increasingly uneasy around her. "I swear to Kami, Hitaki," Anko hissed. "If this is another one of your piss-poor attempts to get Nai-chan to trade you Naruto-kun for that flea-ridden mud of a genin, I am going to rip that Sharingan out of your eye socket and shove it up your porn-loving ass." Ma Anko-san, that's not nice to threaten a fellow Konoha shinobi with such unneeded violence. The masked man waved off in a relaxed fashion. "As for Uzumaki, I still feel he would benefit under me far more than Yuhi-san. Of course, in a village full of shinobi and kunoichi, you're the only one capable of training him." Anko scoffed as she leaned up against the tree trunk, the sarcasm in her voice evident. "You just don't know when to give up, do you?" "Of course not." Another voice spoke up behind the masked Jonin before Kakashi could respond, prompting him to spin around, only to be met by the whiskered teen he had just been observing. "After all, how can he get a second chance to kill me if I am not on his team?" Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the blonde vampire as Anko chortled from where she stood, which had only served to feed his anger further. "What's the matter, Hitaki Teme?" Naruto taunted with a grin. "Upset that Hokage GG put me out of your reach so you can't try and shove that lightning jutsu into my chest again? You should be dead and rotting in the Shinigami's stomach that night 3 years ago." Kakashi snarled out, since it was obvious Anko was clearly well aware of his attempt on the boy's life that night, 3 years ago. "The fact that you are still alive only proves that you are a demon. Peeved. You clearly don't understand any Kekkei Genkai that isn't the Sharingan." Naruto scoffed. "Otherwise, if you were half the shinobi you claimed to be, you would have known that the Uzumaki clan were known not only for their chakra chains, monstrous chakra reserves and stamina, but were also known to have unparalleled regenerative abilities. And to think, you were supposedly my father's best student." The blonde continued with a snarl. "He would be ashamed at what you had become, Hitaki Teme. A blatant contradiction to his teachings. Face it, Hitaki Teme, you are trash." Those final words echoed within the mind of the cycloptic man as both Naruto and Anko laughed darkly as they faded away from his vision, dispelling into clouds of mist that intertwined with one another, all the while their laughter echoing within his ears, before taking form once more on the ground below as the rest of the members of Team 8 were finally arriving, leaving behind a stunned Kakashi. "How the hell does he know how to use a shunshin?" The masked man scowled, unaware that what the two had used was not a shunshin. Growling to himself, the silver-haired Jonin departed in his own shunshin. "Morning everyone." Kurenai greeted her team as she entered the training field, eyeing the two vampires with an accusing glare. "You two are behaving yourself, right? You wound me, Nai-chan." The whiskered vampire mocked being insulted. "When have we not behaved when Anko-chan and I have been alone together? Do I really need to make a list about all the things you two have done?" The ruby-eyed woman lightly glared at the two. "Our first D-ranked mission, at Konoha Textiles, Anko-san had pulled Naruto-san into the changing room, and proceeded to make out with him." Shino delivered in his usual monotone voice. In addition, the provocative loud moans Anko-san made, only served to garner the attention of the patrons within the store. "That was one time," Anko defended, childishly crossing her arms in front of her chest in a mock pout. "Then there was the time at the Gilded Rose restaurant and inn when you dropped butterscotch into the bartender's mixed drink." Sakura pointed out, recounting when their team had been sent to the establishment to help stock, clean, and in Anko and Kurenai's case, sample some of the drinks. "First off, that was purely an accident when Anko-chan and I were wrestling around." Naruto trailed off when he realized his defense was not helping his case in the slightest. "But hey, they got a very popular new drink out of the deal, so it worked out." While it is true that their new butter beer beverage is very popular among its patrons, it does not excuse the fact that you two were horsing around while we were on a mission. Kurenai lightly chastised the two vampires, though she really did enjoy the new drink that came of their fooling around. "That's only 2 things. The whiskered blonde challenged, though from the expressions Kurenai and his fellow teammates had, he could tell they had an entire list of things they have yet to mention. "Let's see, this week alone you two had already swapped out the apples with onions at the caramel apple snack stand on the main road." Kurenai began to list off the series of pranks the two had unleashed upon their unsuspecting victims, holding up her index finger to emphasize the point. "Put fast-acting laxatives in the chocolate in the mixture of the local bakery, as well as some rather questionable, special, ingredients in the batter for their brownies. The Genjutsu mistress raised 2 more fingers, bringing the current tally to 3. Making the store extremely popular for the rest of the day. Both Anko and Naruto couldn't help but giggle amongst themselves at the memory of that particular prank. And then there was that fiasco at the Inuzuka kennels, when the two of you accidentally sprayed poor Kiba with bottle of female hormones to encourage breeding amongst the pack. A 4th finger was raised, while the two of them struggled to hold in their laughter. As well as Sakura, whom was beginning to snigger at the outcome. Which resulted in a pack of large male Inuzuka wolfhounds trying to mount Kiba. It only compounded the matters further when Sume had come out to see what the commotion was, and had fallen to the floor, laughing her ass off at the predicament her youngest child was in. In our defense, he was asking for it when he tried to proposition Anko-chan. Naruto stated. On a positive note, Kiba-san has become more humbled after that particular incident. Shino pointed out, since the feral boy had all but ceased any pursuit of any female after that. That is besides the point. The ruby-eyed woman stated with a sigh, turning her attention back to the pair of vampires. And not even 2 days ago, you two had showered the Yamanaka flower shop with highly concentrated mixture of lavender, chamomile, vanilla, jasmine, and valerian, which sought to Inochi, his wife, and anyone else that entered the shop for longer than 3 minutes fall asleep. That one was actually Ino-chan's idea. Anko pointed out, earning herself a light glare from her sister-like figure. What? She said her father was too stressed out and needed to relax more. Did I miss anything? Kurenai ground out. Well, this morning we put itching powder in the ANBU's uniforms, as well as sneezing powder in their masks, however we left Neko Ni-san alone. Naruto began, earning a groan from the Genjutsu mistress. Oh, we also swapped out the old Mons porn book with a rather graphic yaoi novel. Anko added, though this particular bit of info prompted the team's Pinkette to gain a blush and a slight nosebleed. And we put timed paint bombs on the Hokage monument. The blonde vampire finished with a grin, which was mirrored by the snake mistress. Almost as if on cue, the sound of multiple small explosions could be heard in the distance as the faces of the village's previous Hokages were covered in a cloud of multicolored smoke. As the wind carried away the colorful dust and smoke, it revealed that all of the faces now had various Kumadori makeup. Each of the past Hokage's faces had been painted over, making them look like various kabukis. Wonder what we can do tomorrow to top this? Naruto mused out loud. Think that Genjutsu is ready? Anko added, earning a thoughtful expression from the blonde. Let's just start today's training. Kurenai could only groan in resignation as the two of pariahs began to plot the next day's string of pranks. Sakura, you start off with the chakra control exercises I have you. Shino, work on your taijutsu with Anko-chan, and Naruto, you're with me to help identifying and breaking Genjutsu. Team 7, Training Ground 3, later that day. Hinata Hyuga frowned slightly as she watched over the group of people that were scattered around the training ground, as their day of training was coming to a close. They were supposed to be her team, though that was being extremely generous calling them that. Since day 1, their assigned sensei had shown blatant favoritism towards the Uchiha on the team, giving the Inuzuka and herself only vague instructions while he took the raven-haired teen away for more personalized training. She was fairly certain that if Kiba and herself didn't have their clans to fall back on for the necessary training required of them, they would be at a severe disadvantage compared to the rest of their fellow graduates. The week full of D-rank missions didn't prove to be any better, as Kakashi would laze around, reading that Kami-forsaken book of his, while the Uchiha would slack off, doing the absolute minimum, leaving both Kiba and herself left to pick up the slack. As expected, once they had completed their tasks, meaning herself and Kiba, Kakashi and the client would heap praise upon the arrogant Uchiha for working so diligently, while the other members of the team were only given subpar credit for their contributions. While the Hyuga heiress had never considered herself a spiteful person, all of the special treatment the raven-haired emo received had made her sincerely wish the kin slayer, Itachi Uchiha, would return and finish the job and spare her from having to constantly endure the arrogance the boy exuded. However, her desire to see the Uchiha clan completely wiped from the face of the elemental nations was not what was on her mind at the moment. Well, at least not at the forefront of her thoughts. No, what had her attention now was her supposed sensei, Kakashi Hatake. For whatever reason the man had shown up even later than usual, much to the entire team's annoyance, one of the very few things all three of them could find a common ground on. To make matters even better, the masked Jonin seemed to be in a particularly upset mood when he had finally deemed it necessary to arrive. Foregoing his usual greeting and obnoxious excuse as to why he was late, he had immediately barked out instructions before disappearing with the Uchiha for the rest of their training duration. However, what plagued her mind at the moment about the masked Jonin was a lingering sense that she had seen him from somewhere before. Or rather, his hair to be more specific, as odd as it sounded. Though to be fair, it was one of his more identifiable physical features, aside from the way he covers his face. "All right, my cute little genin," Kakashi called out to them from his perch atop one of the posts. "That's it for today, report here at 6 in the morning tomorrow." So, would that be 6 our time, or his time? Both Kiba and Hinata thought at the same time. The Hyuga heiress didn't bother listening to the rest of what the silver-haired man had to say, knowing that it was just going to be the usual stuff. Which namely consisted on him dismissing both Kiba and herself while he held Sasuke back for additional training. Kami did she hate this team, especially since it put her at odds with finding out just what the hell had happened to Naruto 3 years ago. Or to answer her burning question as to who was that person that had drove that lightning jutsu into his chest. He had something about doing it for his sensei, before he struck Naruto-kun with that jutsu. Hinata narrowed her eyes in thought. What did he mean by that? So far, the only thing she was able to deduce from what she saw that night was that the individual that had delivered the final blow was male, and no doubt, an extremely skilled shinobi, perhaps Jonin or even Anbu level. Admittedly, she probably could have had all her questions answered that very night, if she had just been brave enough to stick around for a few more minutes, instead of running off in fear when she had thought her pillar of light had been killed. Only for him to arrive at the academy the following Monday, completely healthy. Initially, she had been overjoyed that he was still alive. However, that joy had quickly turned to concern as she slowly began to realize that something inside him had changed. No longer did he wear that bright orange jumpsuit that she loved, namely because it made him easier for her to spot. Nor did he have that same warmth he once possessed that had drawn her to him. Instead, there was an aura of allure that surrounded him, but it felt unnatural to her. So, she had backed off and observed from a distance. While she sat there musing, she felt an odd sensation that she was being watched. Her first instinct was to look amongst her team, only to see them still focusing on Kakashi, whom had oddly enough, opted to share some of his past experiences while on unclassified missions. Seeing that it wasn't any of them, she began to observe her surroundings, until she spotted a mop of rosy pink hair. Focusing in on the strange girl, she took note of her appearance. The most obvious was the rosy pink color of her hair that was partially done up into 2 pigtails held up by a pair of black headpieces, somewhat resembling the appearance of bat wings. Her clothing was also odd to the Hyuga girl, consisting of a black, frilly-styled dress with a layer of white ruffles over black ruffles of the skirt. The preteen girl's top had a raindrop shape opening at the top of her chest, just above her budding cleavage with the straps of the top crisscrossing over each other and around the girl's neck to hold up the blouse. Her long, slender and pale arms exposed, showing off her flawless skin. Aside from her clothing, what Hinata found peculiar about the girl was her crimson-colored eyes. Crimson eyes that were staring right at her, causing her to shiver slightly. "Kakashi-sensei." Hinata ventured to speak up, not taking her eyes off the strange girl. "Who is that?" Kakashi took a moment to look in the direction the young girl was looking in, and scowled under his mask as he saw the person in question that the Hyuga heiress was inquiring about. Turning back to his team, he could see the 2 boys curious as well. Surprisingly, Kiba was not drooling all over the girl like he would have almost a week ago, making the cycloptic Jonin ponder what could have caused such a change in the feral boy whom was always trying to show off how much of an alpha he was. "That is Cruel Teps, sole member of the Teps family," the masked Jonin explained to his team. "She moved into the village about 9 years ago with the Hokage's permission. She usually keeps to herself, so I don't know why she is out here." "Wait, family? Why not clan?" Kiba asked, finding it odd that just some random survivor of a family would need the permission of the Hokage to settle into the village, unless they held some sort of political importance, or were extremely powerful. Whether it be from a Kekkei Genkei, possession of an extensive library of high-ranking jutsu, or something else that would benefit the village as a whole. Supposedly she possesses a unique and powerful Kekkei Genkei. Hearing this, Sasuke's ears perked up as he allowed his eyes to travel over to the form of the preteen girl, whom was now conversing with some red-haired woman he could vaguely recall visiting the academy for some reason or another. Kiba on the other hand had recognized the red-haired beauty and had quickly averted his eyes, much to the confusion of both Kakashi and Hinata. "Do you know what her Kekkei Genkei is?" the Uchiha inquired. If it proved to be strong enough, he would overlook the fact that she was a civilian and not a strong kunoichi and give her the honor to bear his children to repopulate his clan, and if her family was powerful and influential as it was implied she was, then all the better to benefit the Uchiha, as it should be. "No," Kakashi replied, glancing to the now two women, his eyes narrowing at the redhead. "She looked too much like that Uzumaki whore that married his sensei, and robbed him of his second father figure after his own father had committed suicide. The only one that knows the full detail of the Tepes family is the Hokage. Not even the councils are privy to what her family has to offer the village. Isn't that odd that the rest of the council would not be aware of a family or clan's potential within the village?" Hinata asked. "It is unusual, but not completely out of the Hokage's power to make such a decision without the knowledge or approval of the council." The masked Jonin shrugged. "After all, the council is there to advise the Hokage, not tell him what he can and cannot do within his own village." Hinata remained silent, as she turned her attention back to the pink-haired girl. Back to the crimson eyes that were boring right into her own, giving the brunette an uneasy feeling about the girl. Almost as if this cruel Tepes knew something about her, and her specifically, as she was seemingly ignoring the rest of the team and focusing solely on her. "That being said, I would advise you all to stay away from her," Kakashi stated, fully turning to the genin before him. "I don't trust her. Aside from the Hokage, no one knows anything about her. Not even Jiraiya-sama was able to find anything about her, her family or her past before the Hokage ordered him to cease all investigations on her." Hinata frowned, not liking the sound of any of this. All the mystery surrounding Pinkette, and the fact that not even the village's spy master was able to dig up anything about the girl's family before the Hokage had ordered him to stop. "What's the Dobi doing here?" Sasuke asked as he glared at the whiskered blonde. This prompted the remaining members of the team and Kakashi to turn, only to be greeted by the sight of Naruto and Anko approaching the two young women they had just been talking about. Both Hinata and Kakashi narrowed their eyes, each for a different reason. For Hitaki, it was because once again, the blonde was mocking him, just with his mere presence. For the Hyuga however, she was suspicious. Kakashi had just told them how the Pinkette was reclusive and kept to herself, only speaking with the Hokage. However, here was Naruto and Anko both approaching and interacting with the preteen girl as if they were old friends, family even. Furthermore, the redhead that accompanied the Tepes girl seemed to be subservient, mostly towards Naruto. Something that struck the Hyuga heiress as being odd. As she continued to observe the group, her eyes widened as she watched as Naruto reached out and caressed the Pinkette's cheek before leaning in and giving her a sensual kiss, causing an old sense of jealousy to flare up within the Hyuga once more. Unconsciously, she had activated her Byakugan only to sharply take in a breath of air at what she saw. Each of their chakra signatures looked off. Naruto's remained to be the solid purple, though now his chakra had black wisps floating outwards, touching and licking the other chakra signatures near him, almost as if they were bound to one another. Anko's on the other hand, had become similar to Ino's, becoming a dark, crimson red with the same black wisps snaking around her signature, intertwining with the other black wisps exuding from the whiskered blonde. Furthermore, the parasitic chakra signature that had been located on the snake mistress's neck had completely vanished. The redhead was an entirely different story. Her chakra signature was like a raging inferno of fiery red and orange, all compressed into one small form. It almost felt like she was looking into the sun, due to the sheer amount of power that was coming off the woman. Very faintly, the Hyuga girl could make out 9 individual strands coming out from behind the young woman, almost as if they were 9 tails attached to her. Lastly, there was the Pinkette herself and the one that made Hinata's blood run cold in her veins. Her chakra signature, or rather, her complete lack of one, was void of all color. Just cold and empty blackness, with more prominent dark tendrils flowing outwards from her body. It was clear that whoever this girl was, she was not human. Deactivating her Byakugan, Hinata watched as the group of people she had been observing depart from the area, all the while a new question burning within her mind. Just what are you, cruel Teps?
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.